capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight, as is often the case, and it looks like he's frozen. He was having some difficulties earlier getting his audio to work, and looks like the video has gone with it. Yep, down to a low connection speed. But who will be joining me is Dan Plaat of What's Left in Albany, and also of the Three Left show. But he's transitioned the name into What's Left in Albany to focus on more local issues. And tonight we're going to be doing some more reaction videos. We did a whole bunch of them last weekend. It was a lot of fun. You get a bunch of different topics to cover. And so we're going to keep on that thread here. It looks like he's back in action, ready to go. Welcome, Dan. How are you tonight?
Good. I made a mistake of fiddling with my Wi-Fi antenna, thinking I could dare improve the reception. Hey, James.
Hey, James. How's it going?
The only person, I wasn't in the room, but you said I was cool. And
Yeah.
I watched your thing Monday.
Yeah.
The thing where you mostly just watched bullshit voice actor videos, it seemed.
No, that was not me. I don't know.
The audiobook. The audiobook.
Oh, the audio. Oh, the voice actor. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
The narrators. And it's like, how to be a good narrator. Have all the skills. You know, the skills.
Right.
It's like they skip to the end basically and then just start talking. Okay. Okay week. A lot of things on my plate, but making progress with the radio station.
That's wonderful.
It was broadcast from the broadcast computer with the automation software. So the big step now, which is more of a chasm, is to actually get all of the producers to make the stuff to put in the schedule, so I can rebuild it. And reconnect things to Pacifica, and there's a lot of other things, but one step at a time. But it's not I think we're on a good footing.
Sweet.
Yeah. So it's probably too ornery to do, but I'm a little less scared. I'm a little happy. Kanye is kind of getting canceled for reals, though. On the one hand, he's a black billionaire, so that's why he's being canceled, right? If it's a white billionaire, white billionaires can't be canceled because they actually own things. Kanye doesn't actually. He's super wealthy, but he actually doesn't own the means of his wealth.
Seems like he's got a lot of deals with like Adidas and stuff. Yeah,
and right. It's not dependent on him owning any means of production. The other hand, he went full Nazi. And
yes, he did.
No millionaire,
and he's not really back down.
Oh no!
Did you see his?
That's what it means to be full Nazi.
Right.
Not his full apology, not the full video of the apology, where he basically goes like, "No, I understand. I am anti-Semitic. Right. I'm not apologizing, but at least I understand that much now."
Yeah.
And he was reading his apology. He was reading it, which leads credence that he doesn't read because he was struggling to read his apology. It seemed, or he just he hadn't read it beforehand. But yeah.
And then he goes, I realized I was being anti-Semitic. By the way, here's a list of all the Jewish CEOs.
That's
of
as far as I got.
Companies.
That's
which,
as far as I got.
The reason that so many of them turned out to be Jewish was because that like a handful of guys own a whole lot of companies, like really big companies.
He was
So
listing a bunch of companies, but they're all
they were all owned by the
subsidiaries
same
of
guy.
one.
Yeah, right,
So
exactly.
really, again, he's complaining about media consolidation, but that's a capitalism problem, and
Of course.
he must hate the players and not the game.
Uh huh.
Um, but it's like he's too dumb to even grasp the NPR kind of would point out problem of media consolidation. So
Mm-hmm.
again, like there's the not again, but there's layers of understanding when it comes to political education. There's
Right.
the level where you just know who's the president. There's the level where you know the branches of government, what they do, and then the departments and what they might
Mm-hmm.
do. You have a general idea. Then there's the level where you know enough American history about how things developed. Then there's the level where you know how to run for office, and there's the level where you understand. Now, I'm not even talking about government, like how the economy works. You understand media consolidation, or you understand deregulation. You understand the neoliberal agenda, or how it's been
Mm-hmm.
carried out, and how it's changed things since you were born. So general education is understanding where you are today and how you operate versus when you were born and when you didn't weren't able to know anything. And Kanye has not moved on. He thinks like a 6-year-old, literally, like
Oh yeah.
in his Lex the engineer conversation, which
Oh
I
man.
listened to all of. He
Yeah,
literally
I think I
says
heard all of it.
all history is bullshit. Students should only be taught STEM. No
Right.
humanities, no social studies, all bullshit because it's also like only he's an objectivist. He's a Randian, he's
Yeah.
only objective reality, which is ignoring 3/4 of all other reality,
Right.
which is the subjective, the intersubjective, and the interobjective. If you
Uh-huh.
only believe in the objective, what you could personally observe,
Uh-huh.
it's not a lot, not a lot of options for knowledge gathering.
Uh yeah.
But it's like a history was written by the victors, so you can't trust it.
Yeah. You
But
knew that
there's
was
all
going
those,
down a bad path.
and then not the Holocaust denial, but Holocaust revisionism is the only thing he was holding back on before, but then he didn't because whatever. He's
Yep.
committed.
Yeah. Yeah. He's made his choice now. So no going back from that.
Well, he's attempting to walk back, but he's actually a
He,
terrible communicator. Who
no,
knew?
he just trips over himself so hard walking it back that he ends up saying, 5 worse things in the
Yeah.
process.
That's all he's been doing those last 2 weeks, though.
Uh-huh.
And it's yeah, because I mean, he hit like a low point. That
Mm-hmm.
was the catalyst for this. At least he had something before, like we when he was last 4 years, his worldview has been the same, but at least he had a wife, he had access to his kids, he had friends, um, whatever. But now he doesn't have anything, so it's like I have nothing left to lose. Now I will go full Nazi.
Yep. Yeah, and like a good little Nazi, he blames one specific group of people for all of his troubles rather than the
Mm.
system itself, uh,
And
his
he's the
untreated
Messiah,
mental
and he's
health.
and he's the
Yes.
Messiah. He's messianic.
Right.
I'm going to save the black people through my communicating, speaking the truth. I'm a prophet. I'm like the
Yeah.
prophets, the judges, not the judges, but the prophets.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's odd, and that's the kind of leader he sees because it's also a liberal thing to like I raise awareness and that solves the problem. Once I raise
Right.
awareness that
So
of
people are
Jews
just
owning
uneducated.
things,
Yeah.
then things will just fall into place.
Hmm.
And the fact that it isn't, it must be very confusing. And then everyone actually does cancel him because yeah. What now? Yeah, it's okay. Anyway, let's go on to
Absolutely.
issues of real import, I suppose. What do you want to
Absolutely.
start with?
Oh, let's see. I think. Hmm. Start off kind of light, maybe. Maybe the one on the high rise.
Okay, yeah.
What do you think of that? All right.
What do you think of that? What now?
Yeah, I didn't mean that as a challenge. All right, you want to
Buildings.
set up this?
Should they be tall? What is density? What is density? We've covered this before, Zach, on previous or when we actually did originally urbanist streams. We kind of covered this quite a bit.
Yeah, we did.
Excuse me. Choking on a Reese's.
Oof.
Trademark. What is density, Zach? What is density? What is a tall building? Do we need tall buildings? And why? There are so many urbanists, NIMBY and YIMBY, that do not consider high rises to be needed or part of the solution to the housing crisis. And, and there's the bigger issue, housing crisis. There's not enough housing.
Right.
There actually isn't enough to meet demand. At least, and also in the places where there is demand. So it's not only how much housing, but where, because that's tied to where the jobs are, or where the work or the economic activity is happening. And since it's all technically really unplanned, it's a mess, and people basically have to move around. So much for having a choice, right?
Right.
So this is one of the urbanist pages. There are several. They're all varying levels of cool or bland. These two are Canadians, I assume. They speak of Toronto and Montreal quite a lot.
Montreal, yes.
Montreal. So I was listening to the Austrian SM artist, like she was saying, she was doing a map of Quebec, and the way she would say, because she speaks French, Montreal, she was just saying it's so different than I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Me, a New Yorker, says it. So I'm like, oh, you know what? That is probably right. I should do that. Montreal.
Well, it just sounds cooler too.
I guess.
Montreal.
It's a Montreal.
Montreal.
With a hard R. She said it even differently than Montreal. It was like almost
Montreal.
like a two less. But anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, these are like they're very professional. They're more of the professional class, MC kind of urbanists, looking at things purely from how do planners regulate things, or how should they? And speaking of things not in terms of political struggle or politics, well, I mean, I guess they recognize it's political, but they're stuck in the cage of capitalist realism, which is a centrist, liberal, neoliberal thing. And that's their weakness that comes a little not quite forward here, because you have to know about it to pick up on it, like ideology classes. Because otherwise, it seems like the argument's very simple. It's do we like or not like high rises? Are they necessary? Is the missing middle enough? And so let's just go through their arguments. This is they do a good job of doing an overview.
All right, let's take it away.
A lot of people in the urbanist space don't particularly like tall buildings. Their vision for a dense urban environment is more Brooklyn than Manhattan, more Paris than Hong Kong, and more Montreal than Toronto. This view isn't universal, but it's pretty common. On a personal level, we're actually sympathetic to this. Some of our favorite videos that we've made highlight Montreal's multiplex housing, which we praised as not too tall that you need an elevator to reach the ground, or too spread out that you need a car to reach a grocery store. Medium density housing is underappreciated in English North America, and if we had to design our ideal neighborhood from scratch, it would probably look something like that.
But preference is different from policy. We're happy saying that on a personal level we prefer a more ground-oriented density of 3 to maybe 6 stories over a taller apartment building, but we're more hesitant when people point to the benefits of medium-density housing as a reason to block taller buildings from being built. We're not saying it's wrong to regulate housing in some ways, but urbanists should know the pitfalls of over-regulation from looking at the highly regimented suburbs that we so often criticize. These were designed by people who want to tell you exactly what kind of housing you should live in.
Single-family detached.
How big your yard should be.
Big.
And how much car parking you should have.
Lots.
This doesn't take into account people's different needs and preferences, and it doesn't appreciate costs and trade-offs. Urbanists need to be careful to not replicate this heavy-handed approach, even if, and maybe especially because, they're so confident that their preferred level of density is the best one. In this video, we're going to look at what the anti-tower perspective gets right and what it gets wrong.
Note 1. Let's not counter one extreme, overregulation of suburbia, with the other extreme, overregulation in cities.
Yeah.
So there's point 1.
Yeah.
2 wrongs don't make a right, Zach, and we obviously don't want to counter Nazi extremists with left-wing extremists. That's you know I see
it's just a recipe for disaster.
I see the centrist fallacy at work. In
Oh
that
yes,
intro.
I'm seeing it too.
So there's note 1.
One argument people give against allowing taller buildings is that they're just not necessary because mid-rise and even low-rise housing provides plenty of housing. This is usually based on looking at European cities that achieve pretty high densities with 4 to 8-story buildings. It's true that you don't need tall buildings to achieve a dense city, but if you're going this route of trying to emulate European cities, then you need consistency and buy-in from a lot of property owners and developers. Paris and Barcelona are very dense because they're almost entirely.
But what if you just have regulation? I mean, then
No,
you don't.
the regulations follow from the buy-in from the people who make money.
I see.
That's how democracy works. It's you need landowner buy-in.
People with lots of money
Yep.
tell you how to run the country, and they do it. Okay.
But they have to have a
mid-rise
consensus.
buildings.
I see.
Our approach in North America has been the opposite of consistency. We try to limit density and concentrate it in less desirable spots, like arterial roads and former industrial land, leaving most roads limited to only low-density housing. This results in the extremes of tall and sprawl. We can and should change course here, allowing medium-density development by default literally everywhere, and probably that would reduce the need for higher densities. But it's not magic. You can't force people to sell or develop their low-density property, and you can't guarantee that every project will be financially viable as medium density.
Says you.
We're not playing city skylines,
At least not until after this video.
where we can demolish and rebuild a neighborhood on a whim.
The second argument people give against allowing taller buildings is that
But you don't have to demolish. I mean, again, you just change the regulation, and that change over time changes the character of the neighborhood. So.
Actually, design flaw of city skylines is in order to change the zoning of a block, you have to demolish everything on it.
Oh, I see why they're saying that. Okay. But
I
yeah,
know.
that's
I don't
not-
know if that's why they're saying it, but that's
Oh,
why.
oh.
That's one of the things I don't like about skylines is
Yeah, that's
you
annoying.
do have to actually demolish places to in SimCity
rezone?
you would rezone things and then what was built or
Yeah,
would
then the
change.
developers come in. They're like, oh yeah.
Which is how it really works. You know, it's like you can't just force people to sell their land. Tell it to Castro, okay? But again, there's note 2 is their points are ahistorical. They ignore why skyscrapers or high rises even exist in the first place, which is a real estate development of a certain type, and as if the regulations came first, and then things follow from there. It's taking a very technocratic approach that everything follows the regulations that are made, like a planner sets down a plan. But that's not the way cities ever developed, and it's not how they developed as industrial cities, and why high rises were built, and in suburban sprawl as well at the same time. As if that wasn't, I mean, that was all regulation too, but it's ahistorical is the general note.
Yeah, I'm reminded too in hearing all this of a video we watched a while back, and I think it was on the tallest building in the world that was going to be constructed, and someone had
Not
recalculated.
the Burj Khalifa.
Well, it was one of the biggest buildings anyway. It was a really huge one. I think it was in Dubai, and someone had recalculated what it would take to do it in mid-rise fashion, and it basically took up the same footprint because of all the air rights and land rights and set-asides you have to do. So,
and they mention that the higher you go, the more floor area you have to devote to elevators and structure.
Absolutely too. True. Yeah. And the more traffic congestion then just gets funneled into the core of the building, rather than, if you could just go out onto the street, you know, you have almost
Yeah,
unlimited.
it's weird. They say they've lived in the high rises. Yeah, they also
Hmm.
refer to the commute of being in a high rise as being minutes. But in certain tall buildings, with it could be 10 minutes. It could not like it
Oh
depending on
yeah.
how tall it is really and how much if everyone's leaving at the same time or roughly
Uh-huh.
the same time, you could be waiting a while for the two elevators in that building.
Right.
And it's only alleviated by having like in my office building of 10 floors, there's 4 elevators,
Wow.
which is enough to keep things flowing really well.
Yeah.
But it's 4 elevators, which seems like a lot to me. Considering how many
Oh, that's
elevators
a lot
were
of
in?
space.
I was in a 10-floor condominium in Manhattan. It was the dorm building, so it was a lot more. Well, maybe I don't know what the difference of number of people in the building or but this was a residential tower, different. But the elevators were always overloaded, and it
Hmm.
took a while, and that's why I really liked. I would move lower in the building as time went on, so I could be closer and just use the stairs,
Oh yeah.
even when I
Makes
had
sense.
groceries.
Yeah. Yeah, you build up that cardio. um, I'm reminded of, or I'm thinking too of a couple of high rises that I service doing landscaping, like I do green roofs and stuff like that. One of them is a 28-story high rise. It's all residential, and I do like the penthouse on the top floor. They only have three elevator shafts, and one of them is pretty much always broken. And it takes a good long time, even when there's nobody around, to get an
Yeah,
elevator to go up or
right.
down.
Because
And then
you only need one person going from floor 20 to the lobby
to the bottom, yeah,
to take
they
up
get
that
total
floor.
rain.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, I mean, at least it's a taxi that's going down. So if you want one
Right.
that goes up, there's only one. So if
There's only
somebody's
one.
already on their way up, you have to wait until the
Hmm.
one that's going down
Comes
reaches you. But
all
if
the
it
way back
stops
up.
3 times, that's it's like half a minute for each stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then there's another one that I do that's only a 20-story building, but they have four shafts. But then they also have four defunct shafts that have never worked, and they just take up tons of interior space in the building.
Defunct shafts
Yeah, like
for mechanical, you mean, or
they're just not operable. Like you cannot. There's no button to call that particular bank of elevators. I've never seen them open or close. I suppose it's possible. There's
so there's
four service
doors like
elevators.
there's
Yeah, there's
doors
doors
like there's
on every
elevators,
floor. Mm-hmm.
but they're
It's
not operable.
Yeah, I
Because
believe at one
you
time
could
the
you
building
could have a maintenance, service. You said
it could be
service
service, but I've never
elevators,
seen that happen either. And I've seen service people come in and out. They just use the regular elevators.
right?
Um, so that's kind of weird. Like I think at one time it was probably a department store. Kind of has the look of a
So
department
so
store.
it's a converted building then.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe they're converted lofts.
Uh huh.
But yeah, tons of wasted space, tons of wasted time. And in that one too, even with four elevators in operation, it takes a long time.
So
Like,
James mentions the Big Bang Theory, and I guess
yeah, there you
the
go.
they live in an apartment building with broken elevators.
Yeah, that's like one of
I
the
didn't know
running
they lived in
jokes,
a
I
high
believe.
rise. But I guess it does take place in Boston, does it? Or those
Something
are
like that, yeah.
MIT students?
I think so.
I don't know. I only watched half an episode of Big Bang Theory, and I wasn't impressed
I never got into that
because
either. It's
it was obvious to me that they were writing nerd jokes, but the writers weren't nerds. So
right. I mean,
they
it's
were
just
writing jokes as if they were pretending to be nerds.
right. It's just a bunch of one-liners that have the flavor of nerd culture. It's total pandering, and
Well,
every
it's not it's pandering to normies who like laughing at nerds. So when you make fun of nerds, you don't make jokes that the nerds would understand. You make jokes that normies understand. Like, oh,
yeah.
aren't these nerds weird? They like Star Trek. It's like that's the joke. And so it took me half an episode to understand that. I'm like, why would any nerd or geek like Big Bang Theory?
Yeah. I don't know. I've met him here and there, but whatever. Not my thing for sure.
All right, James brought it up.
All right, let's move on.
Shorter buildings are in fact just as dense. because extra height requires more space for reinforcement and utilities like elevators and water pumps. This is relevant when you get really tall, maybe 60 to 70 stories, according to construction engineer Ryan Potter.
They talk pretty
For buildings
fast,
we're
though.
concerned with, you can reasonably expect that adding more floors will add usable space. With that said, there is some truth to the idea that tall buildings aren't always as dense as they seem. But the key isn't utilities or elevators so much as lot coverage. This isn't relevant for all high-rises, some of which use most of their lot, but many don't, and they could theoretically have been built to use more of the ground space instead of going as tall. Of course, there are reasons, right or wrong, why cities have preferred going taller. The 1960s-style tower in a park concept was trying to provide green space, or in some cases the bastard cousin of green space, surface parking, while the Vancouver-style slender point tower on a podium tries to integrate into the streetscape, while being less disruptive to light, views, and wind. For many projects, there is a legitimate debate to be had over the merits of wider versus taller. But if you only want to cut down a tower without allowing it to go wider, because you think fewer elevators or whatever is going to make up for the lost floors, that's just not realistic.
The third
sounds like a
argument
straw
that people
man.
use against
Like people just want to
Taller
limit height of tower and basically not require that you use more lots of your lot. I mean, that's what the zoning would do. Limit height, but use more lot.
Right.
Because it's which kind of zoning are you going to follow? There's the 1916 zoning code of New York, which creates the telescoping tower where you can use your full lot. You just have to use less of it, going up. Versus the 1960s rezoning code, which allowed for the tower and plaza. So if you don't use your full lot at the base, you could go taller with your tower.
Yep.
Yeah, which really sucks.
So the argument
because those zoning codes in the 60s were devised by a tax accountant. Because New York was losing tax revenue that they could be gaining from the floor, like by giving more floors, I guess.
Gotcha.
Because no, we're not taxing them based on the land, but the land value. So, the land value goes up if they build taller. So why not give them a little plaza at the base, even if the plaza really sucks?
Like, no one ever uses it, and it's
look at News Corp's headquarters.
Buildings is that they cost more to build, so they're inherently going to be less affordable. It's actually surprising how many people think tall buildings are inherently luxury and unaffordable. If you've ever tried to find a cheap apartment in a Canadian city, there's a good chance you ended up in a high-rise built in the 1970s.
That's in Canada.
Height does increase construction costs. For example, past a certain height, the building code prevents cheaper wood frame structures. In Ontario, the limit is 6 stories. But the key detail people often forget is that adding more units reduces land costs per unit. According to a recent study, a housing developer building a 3-story apartment building in the median zip code of San Francisco would have to charge rent of $4,400 a month for each unit to break even. Because so much of this is land cost, if the building was 12 stories, they would only have to charge $2,300 to break even for the same size unit. Still not cheap, but less of a disaster. This pattern is not the same everywhere. In cities with cheap land, like San Antonio, 3-story buildings are cheaper per unit than 12-story ones. And in other cities, like Portland, Oregon, 7-story buildings are cheaper per unit, at least in the median zip code, which was the basis of the study. With all that said, development cost is not everything. Even if housing is cheap to build, if you're not allowed to build enough of it relative to demand,
I just noticed something on the graph that I didn't catch this second time. It's break-even rent. So that's what you need to charge just to break even on the construction.
Just to break even.
Never mind profit.
Right.
Break even rent for apartment. That's
no
interesting.
One's charging break even rent.
Because this is in a world with subsidized or all public housing. If we're just talking about like building housing from the public for the public good, then these numbers would make sense or could be applicable. But in a market, I don't know. It would be probably a stretch to say they're meaningless, but they're not as helpful.
Not as helpful, no, because that's probably going to be. I mean, it depends on what your vacancy is set at, like what sort of vacancy you're building in. So, but definitely it's going to be much higher than break even. And when most Americans on their own cannot afford even a $1,200 a month apartment,
So what does it
things are
matter if
getting
it's tall
pretty
or not?
expensive.
Obviously,
Yeah,
the problem is not, or the thing to argue about is not whether to build tall or not.
uh,
Obviously, there's a lot of other things that need to be addressed first before we argue about how tall we allow buildings to be.
right.
So it's the wrong order of things to discuss. And maybe you've caught on, Zach, but they seem to have this. They seem to be focusing on dollar cost of things, as if that's the only way to judge why you should go tall or not.
Hmm.
Is the cost effectiveness, so to speak, which is important, but it's when people are arguing, they most half of the arguments are not based on cost. But I think that's maybe what they're calling out. They're being liberals, and it's like, well, they're not being realistic because the costs are, so important. It's fact, it's the only thing that really matters when you come down to it. Is it going to be cost effective?
Yeah. But I'm thinking too that the big elephant in the room that they're not even really addressing is even if things are affordable, if they're being snapped up so quickly by, the BlackRocks of the world, again, what does it matter? Like, or if they're being just converted into Airbnbs or
And
like
that's
any
and
number of
that's
these
the
things that destroy
yeah.
housing.
It all the videos ignore all of those things. They just focus on the new urbanist memes for transit orient teens baseline.
Yeah. Just
Uh,
bigger, bigger, better. Yeah.
Whatever. But yes.
Yeah. All right.
which was the basis of the study. With all that said, development cost is not everything. Even if housing is cheap to build, if you're not allowed to build enough of it relative to demand, you'll still have a supply shortage. This means high prices or long wait lists, depending on how it's allocated.
The next argument people make is that tall
Again, too, like we covered in another video. What about, you know, the type of housing? Well, you can build a whole bunch of one-bedroom apartments, but that's going to be no good for families. Um,
You could build a
where,
bunch of 3 bedrooms, but that's not good for students or up and comers.
sure, yeah.
But yeah.
So it's missing context.
But the whole
taller
thing, like
buildings aren't
Americans
as
seem
livable.
to think that high rises are only luxury apartments because that's what's built, jackass. I mean,
Yeah,
it just smacks us out of touch
I agree.
to
Yeah.
ignore that all high rises built in America are luxury apartments. They're
Well, I mean,
not they're not the HUD. It's not HUD building them because HUD
right.
has now made it official policy to only do mid rises, if ever, but mostly do infill development, which is fine. That's a fine policy. It's good, but and then that's actually what's being argued for. So HUD is actually following the critiques of high rises that the
Mhm.
tower in the park was not.
Was
It
not
wasn't
very.
livable long term. It was high maintenance costs, and it wasn't really. I mean, it was definitely a step up, and obviously there's a lot more going on, like
Huh.
underfunding, which is
Yeah.
not the problem with luxury buildings, but you actually find some of these high-rise luxury buildings where the tenants will also have lots to complain about. That there's corners that are cut, maintenance
Oh
isn't
yes.
done properly.
Oh yeah.
It's you still have shitty landlord ownership unless it's a co-op, and then it's fine. And
It's
then people
better.
complain about meetings, but hey,
Hmm. Hey,
problems are
I'll
solved.
take that complaint every time
Yes.
for sure. Um, and like the only affordable mid to even high rises that are being built in my area, especially in like the urban cores of Minneapolis, St. Paul, they're all luxury. They're the ones that are being built that are affordable. I should say are 55 plus
Yeah.
establishments, and I don't know how affordable that is anyway. But um, other than that, it's all luxury. Mid rises, high rises, everything. And we've had a pretty good building boom these last
But 55
5 to 10 years now.
plus, you mean elderly
Supposedly, yeah,
age?
yeah, it's for
That
yeah,
reminds
55
me of
plus
this. I saw a
age. Yeah.
post with a story about how it was UCLA or California College, where
Hmm.
they built a retirement community tower in the middle, not in the middle of campus, but like in what should be the student housing ghetto. And so you have this elderly community that's just complaining about all the noise and rowdy students, as if, it's odd that like it's in the marketing side of things, or the new urbanist playbook, that, well, neighborhood also has to be diverse in ages. You want a diverse age range, but not if it's all students. That you're meant to have old people with families, or
Right.
what have you, or in terms of like their interests. And so it's not just ages or class, but that's what it comes down to as well. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's move on.
I just thought of that.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Some people mention social isolation, and while that definitely depends on your personality, it's probably true on average, with the same thing also applying to large houses in a low-density neighborhood. When it comes to height, we also like not having to rely on an elevator to reach the ground, and having our own front door is nice. I also find balconies a lot less pleasant when they're high up. But let's put this in context. We've lived in taller buildings before, and it's not like we hated them or anything. Certainly not enough to want them banned. We'd even consider living in one again, giving up easy ground access, if it meant a better price, commute, or location. There's actually a fundamental problem with how we talk about density in housing. People condemn the livability of towers, saying they lead to social isolation or too much separation from the ground. But it seems like critics don't really think through the
That's a
actual
design
alternatives.
problem, though.
It's like
that's not a height problem. My education would say that's a design problem. If you had every fifth floor was a sociability floor with a park, or social rooms, or functions or social function room on each floor, then not social isolation isn't really the issue there. It's there are towers that are built, high rises, that have park floors, or a park almost contained within it, and various functions at the base, or the roof. And that was kind of one of the tasks, actually, when in second year, where we're doing a housing project, which is just 9 units, but it's a very small lot. So you're making a building that's 5 floors or something. And we were told, like, start from the roof and design down to the ground. Usually the design is start with the ground floor and build up. You're going to start with the roof and go down. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that as being a way to mitigate some of the social isolation, and I certainly saw that. I've seen that on a lot of the rooftop areas that I maintain. There is social interaction, but then again, it is exclusive. You're not going to meet just anybody.
Yes.
In those sky lounges, and that's one more amenity that's going to bump up the price of rent.
It needs to be in the ground floor. That way other people in the neighborhood, it's a big, you have a beer hall or a coffee bar.
Sure. Yeah, if it was something that was open to the public, yeah, I could see that being a little bit better.
But there was more to it. I mean, Corbusier had his like tall housing slab, and he had like a shop street that was like on the 20th floor. Not totally utilized, though, and that's sort of something that is mentioned. It's why a lot of designers don't bother with it really anymore, is that you could have these sky malls or things in the sky for the tenants, but they would just be for the tenants. They wouldn't really be the social mixers that they would want them to be, or intend them to be. And
I would think part of that is just the friction of having to move then between buildings. If you want to go from like one sky bar to another sky mall or something like that, and it's one building over, that's a long elevator trip down. Then you have to get transportation to the next building and then go back up. I mean, maybe if they could do some sort of skyway system.
Sky bridges are cool.
Yeah.
But you need a bunch of towers first, and
right.
And then all the different owners would need to like see the utility of connecting their buildings.
Right.
But most of them being built in isolation from each other don't have a hallway or corridor going to one
Yeah.
side of it. They would have to cut through an apartment or remove one,
Sure.
and that's not going to happen.
No, you could definitely plan for it better though. I think Minneapolis
Yeah,
has the most extensive skyway system in the country, if not the world, maybe.
but that's two
Um,
stories up, right?
yeah, that's the second floor.
And it's a
Um,
downtown area, so it's kind of they are built post hoc, right? Like on the side of the
right.
building,
Yeah. And
above the
I
sidewalk.
mean, it's hard to navigate if you haven't been there. I'll certainly say that because it's not straightforward grid pattern like the streets are, and you're not always able to see the outside to orient yourself. But then also, they've really taken a hit during COVID. Um, some of
Hmm.
that is self-inflicted because they basically cut off the skyway to anyone that didn't live in one of the buildings, one of the residential towers that was connected to it.
Yeah.
They made it really hard for people to get into during COVID because they were afraid of riots and stuff. But they just, a lot of the retail there has just gone under
Oh, they were afraid of the riots spilling into the indoor
into the
commercial
skyways. Yeah,
areas. Okay.
yeah.
Well, there's something similar to that in that a section of the skyway, it's not a skyway. Well, I guess it technically is. It's a covered pathway that goes from one of the downtown streets at the base of the hill up the hill in Albany to the plaza,
Hmm.
the Empire State Plaza, and which is how many stories is it? It's like 6 stories, and so it's part of it is escalators, so it's a nice way of getting up the hill.
Hmm.
But part of it that's adjacent to the arena was enclosed, so it has now full doors and it's carpeted,
Hmm.
which makes it an indoor space that then
Hmm.
okay, we can lock this now, which basically
Right.
completely cuts it off
Hmm.
from the first street that it starts on. And it was meant to like, well, there's a lot of homeless, unhoused people that sleep in this indoor area here, so keep them out. It just sucks.
What is that Cuban dollars, Mumbos, or is that American dollars? Are you doing the conversion right there? Yeah.
I, for one, turn that M into a W and set it to Wumbo. That's the problem right there. You set it
These are the
to
pirates
M.
that can.
You set it
Man.
to M for mini when you need to set to W for
W
Wumbo.
for one. I confess I cannot compete with you on your knowledge of pie prices around the Caribbean.
Pies are
But
very important in America, or they used to be.
um,
I
I
listened
mean,
to a Chapo piece where they were reading. One of the reading series was like this woman who was writing a full essay on pies, on how they used to be really important in American culture, and
mhm.
now it's like no one gives a shit about pies. They're just something you
Oh,
buy
but I love meat pies.
because pies they're high to do right. They're high. It's a lot of work, and so post. In post modernity, no one has the time to make a good pie. You have to buy it from a good pie maker,
Uh-huh.
which we had in Albany, though I didn't really like their pies, oddly enough.
That's too
But
bad. That's
they were
too
called
bad.
they were called grandmas, but they just shuttered.
Oh, geez, that pun totally flew over my head. I feel like an idiot now. These are the pie rates of the Caribbean. Yeah. You got me. Well done.
We're being spammed though.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you
Just
made your
having
joke now, so
they're
you're gonna
having
have to settle down.
they're
Or
having
else I'm
fun, I
gonna
guess.
gonna have to mute you. Um,
Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun,
the pie
dun-dun-dun,
rates.
dun-dun-dun.
It's very good. All right, let's get back on topic here. We're talking about skyways. We're talking about sky rises, high rises. Do we need them? Are they good?
Let's
What do
finish
we
it
know
up. Come
about
on.
them? Let's
Yeah.
finish it up.
Yeah. What do they
They're
do?
imagining that people can say,
Instead of living in this tower, I'll take a detached house or a low rise apartment in the same location for the same price.
but that's physically and economically impossible. If you reduce a 20-story building to 4 or 5 stories, you're probably going to raise the price for each unit, and you're definitely going to displace lots of people. Let's say they go live in a shorter building in a more distant neighborhood. You've just saved
That's
them a
the only two
30-second
choices.
elevator ride, but added 30 minutes
Only
Yeah,
two
for their commute.
choices:
That's not a
downtown
choice.
high rise or short suburban, neighborhood.
Suburban detached, yeah.
Which I guess is how Toronto works. So I mean, I guess you got me there, but that maybe speaks to how they live in Toronto, and Toronto has that problem.
Yeah. No, if they were doing a video on what to do with the high rises that we already have, like how to make them more livable and retrofit them and stuff, that would be very interesting.
That's not the question.
But
that's not on the table.
that's not on the table at all.
It's only
whoa, what are you gonna do? Chop down the high rises to mid rises?
They're addressing the arguments of straw people. So I mean,
yeah, I guess so.
General, complaints.
30-second. Okay, these people have never lived in a high rise. A 30-second elevator ride.
Oh yeah, 30-second. That's why I mentioned it before, where they say they underestimate how long it takes to get up and down in a high rise. We're talking about 10 or more, but even 5 or more, really.
All right, dude, you really got to calm down with the spam. Let other people talk too.
Not a clear win for livability. That's a trade-off that should be their decision, not for us to tell them that towers aren't livable. Another detail that often gets forgotten is that taller buildings still have lower-level units closer to the ground. It's even possible to build these as townhouses with their own entrances,
I didn't know
which
that.
is common in Vancouver.
Oh.
I didn't know that. I hate that it's the neo-lib cadence of like, were you aware that there could be units in the bottom of the tower too for those few people willing to pay $5,000 a month?
Right, 5 times the average rent. So yeah, so much for keeping it affordable and whatnot. But hey,
it's weird. But they're only talking about human scale on the ground, though. They're only talking about that. So
yeah. So you could just do both. Just have
they're right. They're sort of right.
In the sky. Yeah. I mean, they are. Like I definitely see that a lot, especially with the new mid rises that get built. They most often have a little patio and a direct entrance to the units. But yeah.
Mumbo can comment on everything that's being said. I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Towers can preserve
see James when he comments.
Okay.
Aspects of ground-oriented density, while also providing higher floor units for people who don't care or even prefer living higher up. Somehow, we forget that many people really do like living higher for the views, light, or just being removed from street noise.
The fifth and final argument we hear against taller buildings is that they create less pleasant streetscapes because they're not at a human scale. Arguably, though, what's more important for creating a lively streetscape is having a variety of interesting features, like doors, windows, balconies, and stores close to the street, because that's what you actually see unless you spend all your time looking up. But let's say you do look up a lot, and you just don't like the look of tall buildings. Fair enough, but housing is first and foremost...
That's not what anyone's saying.
That's not what they're saying. That's not what human scale means.
It means it's a big development, which means you don't get variety at the bottom unless there's this effort made to decorate the bottom floor with a lot of different stuff, which guess what?
Right.
Big developers don't fucking do. Or their version of it is to buy a bunch of empty books and put them on and build a bookshelf on the lobby and have that visible from the window.
Oftentimes what I see a lot lately is they'll just rent it out, the ground floor space, to a large grocery store, like a Whole Foods or Aldi's or something like that, and they just take up the entire first floor.
It's purposely big commercial areas so that it will have to be a big anchor store that pays a lot of rent, of course, because if you have a lot of smaller spaces, let's see, then you might have some empty, but yeah. You have to juggle more tenants. It's easier to have one big tenant than 50 small ones, but then you don't actually have a neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. And that just kind of leaves the upper floors out to dry anyway, because they're definitely not human scale. You couldn't yell up to the 22nd floor balcony to hey Gary, come on, let's go, or something like that.
Actually, there's still people that would probably be having their car parked at the base, honking their horn. Come on, man! Right. As many do on my block. Not anymore. I think any tenants with asshole boyfriends are out now. But there used to be. There would always be a tenant in the middle two houses, because those are the ones that aren't owned locally. And there would always be some someone coming by to pick someone up, and they would, instead of going to the door or texting or calling them, they would just honk their fucking horn for 5 minutes. Like, what if they're in the shower, asshole? What if they're getting ready in the back? They're not hearing you.
Yeah. People do that in my complex all the time. And added to that, there's one person who has a car which maybe is stolen. It's hard to tell. Like, whatever.
So the alarm goes off every day.
Alarm goes off every time they open or close the door. So
yeah. I mean,
that's fun.
That I guess that's why that would occur sometimes. There would be cars on my block that would do that.
I mean, unless they just got a real
wouldn't say
junker.
It's every day, but yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also a matter of being poor, where you have a problem with the car, like the alarm is broken or the sensors are shot. There's always these electronic problems, but you can't afford to take it to the dealership or an independent person to fix it. Or you did, and you spent $100 to a few $100s, but you can't afford to take it back because it still ain't fixed. Or whatever.
And then that could be, although every time the landlord mentions, police coming around or inspections or anything like that, they're out of the parking lot for the next few days. So we're thinking either it's stolen or it's just not properly registered or expired tabs. I don't even know, but it doesn't matter. The only part that actually annoys me is the alarm that goes off.
Foremost a place to be lived in. Aesthetics matter, and we should want nice-looking cities, but not at the cost of excluding so many people from being able to live there, especially when it comes to something as subjective and disruptive.
They started this video saying that with mid-rise development, we could accommodate just as many people.
That's what's odd about it. Like, why do they feel the need to argue for tall, except that it can make some owners very much richer?
Yeah, right?
Vacuum building, anyone? I don't get it.
I have no,
Can you elaborate, Munbo?
Yeah.
Vacuum building. Unless it's another pun. It's probably another car. That means James.
I'm guessing. Probably not their car, the one that the alarm keeps going off. That maybe. Whatever the reason. Yeah. It's annoying.
One shaped like a vacuum in Charlottesville. Oh, okay. There's a tower in Charlottesville shaped like. I can believe that.
Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's what we need. Aesthetically pleasing, object-shaped buildings.
Yeah. Still not as bad as the Pants Towers, but.
The Pants Tower.
Yeah.
Needs a skirt tower next to it. Yeah. Got some legs.
As just not liking the look of tall buildings. Again, if you just prefer buildings to cover more of their lot before going taller, then that's different. But substantially shrinking the
and that's what nobody online ever argues for, right? I mean, they're all stoopy heads that don't do that. They're just saying tall or short.
Right.
That's it. That's all we're arguing about. So really, they could show this video. Like, there's some people online that really simplify what we would argue about, which is, I guess, their overall message, but it's not coming through. I think they're sort of getting stuck in the weeds.
Yeah, like, I don't really understand what the argument for high rises
we're for everything that's argued
as opposed
for
to mid-rise
by opponents of high rises. We agree with them, but we're just not we're not socialists. We don't want to regulate.
Yeah, I just don't want to regulate because you don't want to regulate. I guess
we don't want to ban. We feel it's extreme to ban. It's extremist. We don't want to avoid radical talk like that. Because that it's like taking people's rights. And but the thing is, if you didn't have such overcapitalization, you wouldn't have high rises in the first place. High rises are a direct result of property value consolidation, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think others could explain it better, but they don't really exist for efficiency reasons. Only efficiency of land use in a downtown, like kind of how you only have a city because of industrialism. We could have spread out garden cities if it weren't for industrial production. In the same way, because of capitalist production, you get high rises. High rises are an actual result of capitalist production.
Yeah,
so
because of land speculation.
because of land speculation. That's the phrase I wanted, land speculation. If it wasn't a matter of land speculation or speculating value and gambling on how much people are willing to pay or what have you, or to build on, then everything would be 10 stories. You'd have Paris. And because Paris, I don't recall it being a matter of zoning. It was the Haussmann plan. It was planned out. So I guess they're highly regulated, sure. But there wasn't a ban on tall buildings, but whenever one was built, everyone complained. It really sucked. So they regulate that to the outer fringe of Paris for the commercial sector.
Sure. I mean, with Paris too, a lot of them were built before elevators were in, commonplace.
That too.
Hard to have more than like a 6th or 7th floor walk up.
Right. It was also technology and so on.
Right.
So it's
structural engineering.
Technologically feasible, but again, only because of industrial production.
Yeah.
And so on, which is something that maybe we could scale back on. Or because we're post-industrial. We're post-industrial. We have the post-industrial city, which isn't going to be like the industrial city. We're holding on to these things that industrial cities require, but post-industrial don't. Yeah.
Interesting.
We're still big fans of ground-oriented density of 3 to maybe 6 stories, and we want to see more of it in English North America. That starts with legalizing it everywhere. Multiplexes and small apartment buildings should be allowed in every neighborhood, and we should be careful about setbacks and parking requirements that make these projects less viable. But our cheerleading of medium density was never meant as a denouncement of higher density housing. Fundamentally, if someone proposes to build a tower in a city, it's because there's a lot of demand to live there. Cities can influence the form, design, and location of projects to some degree, but this should be within a framework of housing abundance. Simple exclusion should not be on the table.
Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to insert joke for us in the comments because we can't think of one, and subscribe. And once again...
How lazy. Couldn't think of a joke.
Yeah, right. I mean, that last comment too is like there's only high rises because they're demanded, as though it's not the other way around where construction induces demand in one way or another. It's people are clamoring for high rises here. We have to get these high rises in because people want them.
And it's in zoning that's preventing them from being built, which is sort of a scarecrow too. To Mumbo, a circles are great shapes. It's just a little more expensive to deal with circles than what is called orthogonal construction, which is 90-degree angles. Just you can have things in lines,
more custom pieces,
and you can be a little more creative. Circle, there are definitely many. There's circle towers, right? But there's just not many of them, and there's a lot of financial and practical reasons. It's like it's kind of there's the rule of good shape that when you have a circle, there's the space that you could have a square. There's space you're giving up. Why? There needs to be a reason why. How about building down? Well, that's equally problematic because digging down is a lot of effort and money that you have to spend to go down. Though there are like these prototype like reverse skyscrapers that are like bandied about as future destruction stuff. But we don't destroy the surface level. Yeah. Gotta go underground. It's sci-fi. It's the stuff of sci-fi, and that's the only reason it has to be fantasy if it's gonna be feasible to have a reverse skyscraper where it's going down. But there is certain cool factor to it, especially if you make it wide enough at the top that there's enough sunlight coming down.
Light can penetrate.
But then it has to be summertime basically. If it's winter, you're not going to have any sunlight coming in, not directly anyway. So just go down maybe 5 floors at most. And really kind of stepping like really not like a cone, but like this, like a crater, more like a crater.
Yeah, a
But why
parabola.
would you need to do that unless the topography is already doing that?
Yeah. Well, I guess, maybe you could imagine a dystopian future where it's just not possible to live in some places during the summer. The only way to regulate the heat of structures is through uh, basically
Yeah.
geo heating and cooling.
Yeah, and then James brings up that you do get less wind shear with curved
Yeah.
buildings. It's just the only reason you want curved buildings, but that's why the
But I
yurt's
heard,
good. The yurt is a good, construction in a windy place, igloos and
yeah,
tents like
that's
that.
true. That's
But
true. You
you're
do
not
see that
going.
in
You're
windy
not going.
places.
You just don't go tall in windy places. You don't. You know. Again,
I,
it's
I
it's a it's a misnomer that you need to go tall in the first place.
right.
Elevators costly, energy inefficient. Even when they're not fully in use, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
and congested, they are idle, and they do take electricity to keep idle.
Hmm.
They're not using energy.
Well, there's a lot of so I guess you call it deadheading for taxis and drivers and Uber drivers and stuff. But there's a lot of travel with elevators that no one's in the elevator. It's just going from the first floor up to the top floor to pick up that one person coming down. So a lot of inefficient use of energy as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's right. And if everyone lives in three-story houses without elevators, use stairs, and the elderly who can't do stairs, they're on the first floor always, or you have
Hmm.
them reserved for 55 plus, that kind of stuff. So it's more like you need to don't regulate the buildings, but regulate how units are rented and owned. And that's where the socialism comes in, where if we just regulate
Yeah.
how things are owned so that they're owned
Hmm.
collectively or by groups or by individuals and everyone's a homeowner, this is only possible through non-market means. um, and that solves a lot of these issues of who decides what's built and how it's built. And yes, there are general American attitudes about I want privacy. I don't want a lot of people around me. In Albany, we had a little like interest group called Stop the Stories, and that was just a general like we don't want any
Oh.
tall buildings. And
Uh,
the thing was they were arguing like the straw man, where they were just all their arguments were just the most basic bitch arguments about
I don't
like
like how it looks.
I don't like all the congestion it'll bring. With more people means more parking is needed, and the pollution, and the shadow in my backyard. And it was all
Hmm.
just like these people are not like I can't take any of you seriously because you argue like
No.
children about like what you're concerned about.
Well,
These
it's so
aren't real
it's
concerns.
it's
The
such a self-centered
neoliberal the
way of
neoliberals were
looking
running
at it too.
circles around them as far as just like, well, you can whine, but
Oh,
money rules, not you.
Mumbo, I have an answer to you as well. The minimum lift for a ramp is about 1 inch per foot, I believe. Um,
Yeah,
and really, to have a nice, easy time of it, it's about half that height. So it's about half an inch per foot, something like that. So,
yeah.
you're going up 8 feet. That's a long rampway.
Oh
Going up
yeah.
10 feet, 15
You'll
feet, stuff
notice
like that.
that in landscaping projects or the I think there's a misnomer where like you have those stairs and that ramp kind of cuts back and forth through them
Yeah.
like a switchback. I
Hmm.
like those are really wide steps. Those are like the capital kind of level big steps. And
Sure.
so seeing them in any other context is fanciful, because a real ramp is yeah it takes dozens of feet, if not 50 feet, which if it's a house or something, then that's the length of the whole lot.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Right.
and if you switch it back, then you have to add in the 4 or 5 feet for the
Hmm.
turnaround, and then that's even more square footage of concrete that you
Yeah.
have to pour. So
Plus, every switchback is a
you want something
landing,
that's
and yeah.
straight, and you need a landing every how far 10 feet.
True. Yeah, something like that. 3 to 13. 3 inches for a 13-inch run? Oh, that seems way too steep.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
ratio, but I found it.
Well, that would mean every
Yeah.
13 inches you'd have a 3 inch rise. I don't think that's true. I'm gonna look it up now.
Again, like you mentioned, Zach, there are different, there's the minimum
Yeah, I thought the minimum was
length, and then there's what is
yeah.
good
I'm seeing
practice.
I'm seeing 1 to 12.
It's always been 1 to 12. Maybe
ADA compliant ramp will have to adhere to a rise over run ratio of 1 to 12.
1 to 12,
So that's 1 inch for every 12 inches of length. So
Mumbo says,
but that's just
that's
that's as steep as you can make it. Yeah.
Wait, maybe he's thinking of millimeters or
I don't think. Well, it wouldn't matter if it's the ratio. It's the ratio, whatever unit you're putting in, right? So,
sort of. Okay, let's go to the next video, which is the climate, our changing climate, which of all of the types of climate change kind of type of videos, this guy is surprisingly like us. He is an eco-socialist. He's a radical. He's anti-capitalist.
Our changing climate.
He doesn't express it in every video, but it's there. It's the things that we would complain about the urbanist video we just watched. He will make similar urbanist videos or environmentalist videos, and he'll come through it. We can tell he speaks our language, and so I like his jib. Mm-hmm. And so this is why TV comedies. Why TV comedies get climate change so wrong? So this seems more limited. The scope of the survey that was done seems way more limited than I think that I feel should be done. But it's something. So let's take a look.
Cool. Let's take a look.
This video was made in collaboration with the National Center for Science Education.
Oh, Mr. Plow.
Wow, that's my name. That name again is Mr.
Plow from The Simpsons' 4th season is easily one of the best episodes of the long-running sitcom. For the uninitiated, this 1992 episode involves Homer starting a successful snowplow business that is ultimately spoiled. First by friendly rivalry, then by an unseasonably warm winter day. It also includes one of the earliest mentions of the greenhouse gas effect in scripted media.
Could this record-breaking heat wave be the result of the dreaded greenhouse effect?
And is one of the first, but hardly the last, to undercut the seriousness of the phenomenon.
Well, if 70-degree days in the middle of winter are the price of car pollution, you'll forgive me if I keep my old Pontiac.
It might not seem like much, but if you're watching this video, then you must care at least a little about climate change. It probably puts you among the 59% of people in the US who see climate change as a major threat. And the time for collective climate action is upon us, which means we must try to reach the 41% of people who
if
don't
you want to
seek
trust
out
polls,
information
which
about
are
climate change.
Ever increasingly
Those people
untrustworthy.
Watch TV. On any given day, 80% of Americans will watch or stream TV. From product placements to quote-unquote very special episodes, scripted media can be powerful in raising awareness and changing minds. When it comes to general environmental issues, television, particularly children's media, has devoted countless hours to covering pollution, endangered species, and the importance of recycling.
Most everything we buy will someday be thrown away.
So try to buy things that can be reused or recycled.
Collectively, these efforts have contributed to highly successful community-based environmental programs.
Never rethought.
Uncle Tad says.
However, of all the environmental issues covered,
there's no third R. There's no first R. Only the second and third R.
Yeah, let alone repair.
Yeah, so that's 4 R's, true. But that I put that under reuse.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
I don't.
It does
don't
fit
believe
under
in
that.
putting that as a 4 FAR. It's reusing is I can reuse it if I fix it.
Sure.
It's after the first use that it breaks.
Climate change has gotten comparatively tiny amounts of screen time. And when it is discussed, we found that it is usually framed in a way that casts doubt on its existence, treats activists as scam artists, and discourages action. For this video, graduate students studying science communication through the National Center for Science Education went through the past 30 years of television comedy to find and analyze how climate change.
Boy, rough assignment.
Sounds fun though, actually watching TV.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
I mean,
that's
isn't
exactly
that
what I'm saying.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
that was sarcasm. That was sarcasm.
I was a bit too dry in that delivery.
My apologies.
Yeah.
But that's half of the internet right there, reacting to stuff and making notes.
Like, wow, you got to watch the whole box set of Frasier and Modern Family. Man, must be rough.
Well, that's what Jose does with his retrospectives.
That's true. That's true.
You can find out more about our methods in the description below. However, we've still probably missed some examples, so feel free to leave a comment and help us expand our list. Comedy has to take a point of view, and understanding what a writer thinks is funny about climate change can be suggestive of how they and the audience they're writing for think about the issue.
Can you believe it's November?
No, this is global warming. It rocks.
This particular approach relies on the humor of violating the norm of global warming is bad by highlighting a positive side, which almost always has something to do with warmer weather. Of course, this approach only works when the vast majority of viewers see this violation as, well, benign. In the 90s, when this framing was popular.
I think it was Katrina that really kind of put an end to that joke, because
I think you could be right. You don't tend to see that anymore.
It's not always
from reactionaries. That's just a timeless gem for them.
Of sure. Well, they're always 20 years behind.
Right.
But whatnot. But I feel like you can make a joke until there's an event that basically is like, no, the thing you're joking about, like it being warmer, that means there's more intense storms, and it is bad. So stop saying it's like good, or that the goods, there's this positive effect that it will outweigh the bads. Because what's the point of having some warm weather when, like say here in New York, it's ever clear year in and year out that now it is not a matter that the temperatures are so extreme. It's more that the changes are extreme. That we will have 1 week that is 60 and the next week will be 30.
Yeah,
which just happened.
Yep.
And then the next, or it will be a few days that are cold and a few days that are warm and a few days that are cold, or a month that's super cold and a month that's super warm. It seems to vary, of course, but there's a general pattern, but then the pattern is wacky. So there's really no pattern at all, and that's why it's climate chaos so much as climate change. But it's changing to be more chaotic. So this can be adapted to with more passive heating and cooling, so that no matter what the temperature is, that say you have a green room or a sun room or a greenhouse, the temperature is a little more is going to be more stable, not just dependent on whether it's cold out, so you close your window, or warm and you open your window. Because if you have a building like mine where it's like there's really just two modes, cold and hot, and I can't just switch between the two easily. It's a bunch of chores, putting up the storm windows, insulating the cracks. It's like I don't want to have to do this every other week, so I just pick the first time it's cold. I just or the second or third time it's cold, below freezing at night, I will now have all the storm windows shut. But meanwhile I'm burning for heating.
Climate change seemed distant enough to make this appear harmless. That's why comedies from The Simpsons to Frasier,
thank you, global warming,
use this framing, often with the same setup and punchline, over and over.
What is going on? It's supposed to be spring. Where is global warming when you need it?
As we became more aware of the true impact of climate change, this framing gradually became less popular, dying out altogether in the 2010s. While television comedies have become much less glib about climate change, writers still struggled to frame climate change in a way that made people want to learn more. Moving into the 2000s, a lot of humor centered on the perceived obnoxiousness of characters that cared about the environment. The humor here came from the outlandish and extreme environmental views expressed by these characters, from not owning a car, to making their own clothes, to the perennial favorite, drinking their own urine. 30 Rock, My Name is Earl, and Modern Family all had episodes where the main cast was subjected to the mental and physical torture at the hands of these annoying characters.
While you're out there destroying the Earth, I'll be saving it.
While the exact scenarios differ, these occurrences have 3 broad similarities. First, the environmentalist character is an outsider in the main cast, and often low status, suggesting that their perspective is less valid than the main characters.
Yeah, I drive a Prius, so...
And that's a nice little gesture. My car runs on reclaimed cooking oil. I have some literature if you want it.
Second, the character receives a comeuppance by the end of the episode that suggests that they are either lying about their environmental passion or equally as imperfect as the main character.
You're right, it is hard, but it's also alienating. No one wants to be friends with me. I can't tell you the last time I had people over for dinner.
Finally, the take-home message for the audience is often, we know that you, like the main character, are doing your best, and that's fine. While viewers may find this positive message reassuring, it ultimately frames taking even minimal action as extreme and negative. Viewing episode after episode with this character archetype,
like not littering,
skepticism about.
Like, I think not littering or picking up litter is like the main signifier.
Oh, that's always pitched as
you're doing your best.
Solution. Yeah.
And not reducing your own garbage or, you know, but again, it's weird that, I mean, it's parody almost, but it have propaganda, have parody, that we have to go to this extreme caricature of an environmental activist, which sometimes exists. Maybe if James is, being honest about a teacher who recycles pee. Again, I've never known anyone who do that. I do know obnoxious, boomer environmentalists who do kind of have that holier than thou attitude. They're, a little new age, a little, they're boomers, so, but that's not a product of them being environmentalists. It's just how they express it.
Sure.
But it's yeah, but I mean, when you do have full-time activists, you do have a general, like, they're definitely ripe for satire, and because they are problems. But when it's a real environmental organizer, it's insulting, and it's also just shitting on it, and it just comes from an ignorance that the writers of these broadcast TV shows just have never known such an activist. They're just working off of the TV image of or maybe a 30-second soundbite with an environmental activist, and like, oh wow, they sounded really sure of themselves, and they sound like they're better than me. Well, I bet they're hypocrites just like everyone else, because I mean, they come from a place of cynicism, which is the next section actually.
Oh, okay.
Oh well, if he was at NASA, then yeah, that's the only time. That's the odd thing about
that's a little
recycling.
different. Yeah.
Well, it's weird that pee recycling is mentioned in the video, because it's like that's only applicable when you're talking about space travel. That's the only time you ever need to recycle all fluids. Otherwise, does recycling your pee mean just letting it not flushing it out to the ocean, but just letting it go back into your local watershed? Or say having a compost toilet, what a freaky thing to do, to not just flush your shit into the nearest river.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean,
that's considered crazy. It's crazy to not want your shit to go where your water supply is. Or
I think the punchline on these shows is usually look at this kooky environmentalist. They're so out there, they drink their own pee.
Or they want others to be better, or but it's the thing that's sort of being parodies is almost like it's actually like not asking a lot, and it's not asking for maybe enough to solve the problem of a polluted environment. So it's like, and it goes counter to liberal media ideology to write a character who's an actual like organizing against a polluter. Like the closest you get is Rocko's Modern Life, where they literally had free reign to write whatever they wanted in Nickelodeon as a cartoon. But that was like that was the instance where it wasn't just recycling isn't enough. Like the half the episode is about cleaning up, picking up litter, and recycling, and how that was actually not really worth doing as long as the big corporation is the biggest polluter in town.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's funny how it's like that's how that episode's handled.
Yeah. I mean, that was amazing, especially for its time, because that was the original run of the series, I'm pretty sure. So back in the 90s.
Yeah, it was when recycling was a new thing to be promoted. And it did it with a catchy musical number that everyone went to practice to beforehand.
It's like between Rocko's Modern Life and that show, I think it was just called Dinosaurs. It's amazing what they got away with. Those
they didn't get away for it for long. That's thing. They weren't but they were creator driven. That's the usual thing to remember, that when they're creator driven and not executive driven. And shows like the ones they're showing, like NBC shows, they're all executive driven.
Oh,
they're not creator driven at all.
Yeah.
And all the actors are meat puppets.
Yeah. And it's not surprising that it's all about just patting yourself on the back that you're doing a good enough job, driving your Prius or doing the recycling and stuff, because capitalism cannot offer a solution. You cannot consume your way to a sustainable future, and capitalism relies on just ever increasing consumer. Like, the profit motive itself is standing in the way of meaningful action on climate change. So
okay, let's continue.
And general disinterest about learning more. Though thankfully this type of humor has become rarer, one only needs to watch an episode of The Politician on Netflix to see the obnoxious environmentalist on screen today. Fueling this framing even further was climate change's big on-screen debut in 2004's An Inconvenient Truth. While the film had an important impact in inspiring climate action, it also provoked a counter-narrative that took the obnoxious environmentalist character one step further into climate alarmism, often casting doubt on the veracity of climate science. Though several comedies incorporated characters skeptical of climate change, there was no television show more prolific in promoting climate denial than South Park.
If global warming were real, which all proven scientific data shows it isn't,
the 2006 episode Man Bear Pig parodied what the creators saw as alarmism on the part of Al Gore, as he scared the town into believing in the fictional titular character.
Boys, there's no such thing as a man-bear pig.
At the end, when Gore is congratulated for saving the day, the text of the episode suggests that the monster, a stand-in for climate change, never existed. Other episodes, including Goobacks and 2 Days Before the Day After Tomorrow,
global warming,
showed high-status characters expressing denialist views on climate change.
Now this is the one that
correct.
It's The Day After Tomorrow, which is after the day after tomorrow, whatever the actual.
Yeah,
Day after
tomorrow.
Yeah, it's that South Park episode I found cringy. The Man Bear Pig one, I can retextualize, say, well, they're mostly just making fun of Al Gore and how they're really just parodying him, and he's the focus of just the way he talks and the way he explains how dire it is that And the answer is green capitalism, and that doesn't factor in the satire, of course, it never does, but unless it's a leftist doing it. But it's this one that I found cringy and hated, and I think I stopped caring about South Park after this particular episode. The Goobacks was actually pretty positive when it came to making the world better and making the climate, and it actually kind of took not climate change, it doesn't mention climate change, but it's like we don't take care of the world, and it's so bad that the people in the future want to time travel to the past, and using that as also it was more of an immigration panic satire.
I haven't seen that one. Interesting.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
It's you have people from the future coming to the present as immigrants because the future sucks so bad, and and the solution is, if we make tomorrow better, then they won't want to come here anymore. And they do. And, they install solar panels, they start the green economy, and they do everything. And then the final punchline is Stan realizing, wait, this is all really gay.
God.
And so they drop the shovels and go back to this big gay pile that was made because the rednecks were like, I know there won't be a future if we're all gay. So we'll just have gay sex and there won't be any future.
Wow.
So it's like destroy the future versus save it.
Yeah.
But saving it's gay. It's uncool. Which is just a parody of like, well, we don't want to, make the world a better place because that's uncool.
Yeah.
Which,
only dorks care about that.
Yeah. But again, like how much is Matt and Trey being serious and how much are they making fun of the people that, their characters are parodies of Americans.
Yeah. I don't know if they even know at this point.
Well, no, they changed their tune. I mean, it mentions they changed their tune later on in a decade's time. But especially after Trump. But what am I gonna say next? That let's just keep going.
Sure.
That's enough on this.
Global warming isn't happening right now. It's not what caused the Beaverton flood.
Although the creators of South Park, once climate skeptics themselves, have since come around to accepting the scientific evidence for climate change, reruns of these episodes are still airing on multiple networks worldwide, exposing millions of people to very dangerous rhetoric. As a mea culpa, in 2019, South Park released Time to Get Cereal, where Man Bear Pig is shown to be real and Al Gore becomes a hero.
Please, Mr. Gore, we need your help. Man Bear Pig isn't going to stop.
Oh, is it inconvenient now?
While this episode is certainly an improvement on outright climate denial, it chooses to make climate change funny in a way that's been popular since 2016. Nihilism.
These days, just buying a tomato means that you are unwittingly supporting toxic pesticides, exploiting labor, contributing to global warming.
From It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia to The Good Place to SNL sketches, modern humor about climate change wants us to laugh at how little anyone can accomplish, even given the magnitude of the environmental problem at hand. The framing in this type of humor leaves little doubt that climate change is real and an imminent threat. But once again, it encourages inaction. Why would anyone want to take action if it is ultimately doomed to fail?
Press button to see what global warming will do in the next 3 years.
3 years is a long ways away.
Is this the goal of television writers? If they do indeed want to move people to action, then they should instead take note of best practices from science communication. Climate change should be presented as something solvable. Comedy, more than any other genre, has an untapped potential to move people to engage with topics and ultimately take action, both by increasing the number of scripted media programs that tackle climate issues and by framing them in a way that encourages action. Writers can reach the sizable group of Americans who are currently disengaged. Moreover, just as the science confirming climate change is settled, there's a vast literature of science communication studies on the best way to talk about climate change. Here are the top 6 techniques we know.
This applies to any other
local,
outrage too.
Connect to someone's values, show the messenger as high status, normalize taking action, focus on what we can gain by taking action, not what we will lose through inaction, and show success.
Yeah. I want to discuss one of those tips of how show that the communicator is high status.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a generally big problem with leftist organizing and any kind of progress on our front. This problem of what counts as high status and what's low status. Mm-hmm. So it shows that the obnoxious climate activist is low status. How? Because they're poor, because they're less educated somehow. It's usually the skeptic or the denialist who's actually more educated, or they're the PMC class. But what is low status? It's, but not just in terms of class or race, right? It's also the introvert, the nerd, the person who's uncool. So there's social status. So I guess by status we mean high social status, right? Which intertwines with being rich or being wealth or many things, being extroverted, life of the party, all these things. So it's like it's such a laundry list. Like to be a good communicator, to get people's attention and to show them that, or to maybe you can take these in different amounts, but that this really matters. Like when you run for office, like you can't just be a nobody, right? You can't just have good ideas. You need to have some kind of status. You need to show that others like you. So maybe I could like you too. Otherwise, why should I like you or care about you? No one else likes you. There must be something wrong with you.
There's a problem.
But it also goes into elitism and enablism of like, well, you can't communicate to me because you're not high status. You're disabled. You're unhoused. I can't take your opinion on a housing crisis because you don't have a house. You don't have the problem of a mortgage or pay property taxes, right? That's what low status means to say your average homeowner voter. That if you don't own a home, you're a tenant. You shouldn't even probably be voting, or you usually don't. So who cares what you think? You don't pay property taxes. The taxpayer is the person who matters, or should have a say.
That does reinforce the idea that there are natural hierarchies in life, that we should just, like you say, never listen to a homeless person because they are all just losers in life and get what they deserve.
So this guy's a socialist, but as far as the papers he's citing, they're ignoring that in order to solve the climate crisis, we really do need to break social hierarchies and fight, the integrated system of capitalism and white supremacy. And ableism too. Those things are totally interconnected. Actually,
absolutely, yeah.
You could have socialists that are ableists. You can, don't
still
care
do have you see it a lot, and welcome in Amazing Wolf Skeptic. That's great news. Lula da Silva defeats Bolsonaro
in the runoff. You already beat him once, but now he beat him by more.
Very cool.
Got them more than 50%.
Very nice.
Which shows that with runoff elections that you can have minor candidates and they don't force the right winger to win or cause the right winger to win. Because the other candidates were more left than Lula, or something. Or you could have more left candidates.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it totally destroys the spoiler effect argument that's never been on solid ground in the first place. But
on the other note, I think some Bolsonaro, they won big in the big cities. Actually, the Bolsonaro allies, governor races in São Paulo, especially. It seems. I don't know how.
That's unfortunate.
I know. Yeah, it's a left-wing coalition.
Sure.
It's good news, though.
Yeah, it's definitely good news.
That government was in power before, and they didn't. You gotta go full, but maybe not. It's still you're still tied into the global economy. So, and Brazil is not the growing economic superpower as they were a decade ago. I think in the beginning of the decade, like the BRIC, Brazil was seen as like this part of the multipolar world. Now it doesn't seem that way.
Very cool.
Yeah, right. Anti-communist. How do you make a society less anti-communist besides through policy? It's kind of unless education. Yeah, I guess that's a big question. How do you make a society that's been trained to be anti-communist through decades and decades, even revolution, right? Yes. But even that,
revolution needs enough revolutionaries.
I guess,
to work.
But then, we've answered this question, or we discussed like how do we build revolution, and that's it's just the simple act of talking to people and showing through models and action that the environmentalist activist is not obnoxious like the one they saw on TV. That TV is in fact fantasy. Amazing.
Absolutely.
You know, amazing that
who would have thought?
Need to be taught this, but you know, it's
Well,
surprising. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Vanguard.
true. They're also fighting with the weaponry of 100 years ago. So
yeah, but the Vanguard
makes a
then
bit of a
has
difference.
but the Vanguard had to be. I won't use the word totalitarian, but they had to use a heavy-handed state to deal with governing. They couldn't govern without that heavy-handedness. So that's a negative to vanguardism.
I agree.
A good faith negative, I think, not just saying, well, you either have a state or you don't. But I feel like because I don't know. I don't want to argue against vanguardism itself, but but it seems like with Lula can win with his coalition, but as long as there are these other classes that profit from capitalist mode of production, I guess, you can't. Otherwise, it's just different interest groups fighting, and that's it's real history, and it's better than the neoliberal world order, but of where everyone gets along and everyone's the same class. But we got to go beyond that too. Otherwise, it's just the same little circle.
Yeah.
Well, it's the spiral progress, I guess. Okay, let's finish this.
Moving on. Yeah, let's finish it up.
While it isn't realistic to have a character in a sitcom single-handedly solve climate change, focusing on a local climate issue of personal relevance to the main character and having that character find some success making a change is a great way to encourage television viewers to take action. Moreover, it can still be funny. Rather than casting doubt on climate change, however, the humor can stem from disagreements about climate priorities or the struggles of getting broader support for climate change. A great episode of Better Off Ted manages to center the successful implementation of a rooftop garden by two main characters, while still being a hilarious half hour of television. By following this model, writers can produce comedy that not only has social impact, but hopefully won't age as badly as the global warming is good comedy of the 90s. Finally, let's look at one of the most alarming trends. Between 2010 and 2015, there was almost no discussion of climate change in television comedies, which is less than any other 5-year time period since 1990. While it is hard to say what's behind this lack of discussion, the sudden uptick of climate change plot lines in 2016 suggests that it might have something to do with who is in the White House. While Joe Biden's climate policy is promising, it can't operate in a vacuum. Therefore, it is more important than ever to be vigilant on climate change coverage in the media. We should, at minimum, expect television shows that we consume to engage with climate issues in a way that is led by evidence-based science and, without alarming the public, underline the need for action. Even a serious issue like climate change can be funny, as long as we are all laughing towards a solution. Hey everyone, Charlie here. If you've been watching Our Changing Climate for a while or just stumbled across...
So I kind of disagree with that sort of conclusion that, what was the part? That, it was just with how like that gap of 5 years. I don't think it was just who's president. Because otherwise, what the joke, why are still the jokes not, pro action on climate change, even when we had Obama as president, or why are they? Why would they counter the Bush administration? The jokes weren't about the oil drilling in Alaska, though I think some of it was, but whatever. But I think it was more like the writers themselves were like, this was the time they were making up their mind, and so by 2016. They had made up their mind that it's real, but they're libs that can't challenge the system, so you can't get more action on it, or you can't take good action, or you can't express collective action either. So the whole can you express a local issue or local action on climate change without on a national, on a show that's about a national, on a national level. It's kind of abstracts the problem, and in abstracting it, you can't take action on it unless it's with magic or something like that.
That's true.
And also just a general point from a situationist point of view, that media made within capitalism is being made with the capitalist form of production, so it has capitalist values baked in, like the whole, we're going to make jokes that are funny now. They may not be funny later, but we care about short-term laughs,
short-term profit,
not
yeah.
long-term comedy. That requires some kind of long-term ethic, slowness, like a slow burn joke, and that doesn't fit within half hour or hour television, unless you build up I don't know. It would need to be experimental media. Maybe something Means TV can, when they fund shows, or you can make something to put on Means TV as a outlet. Try to put these tips into practice.
Yeah, Means TV. That's a good idea. Very good. All right.
So that's 2 down.
Yeah. Do you want to do Semiconductor or first Eco-Socialist International?
Let's do Eco-Socialist International.
Yeah, I kind of think that
we're
will
talking
fit in
eco-socialism
better.
right now.
We're talking solutions and stuff.
Right. You get a lot of different stuff. So these are the real. Some of them are environmental activists, but they also have the energy of organizers. So you can see, like, this is what real organizers sound like when they're not a caricature.
Cool.
International is not formed primarily along party lines, so it's different than some of the internationals before. Anybody who's down with this set of ideas, set of principles, whether you're with a party, you're with a collective, acting as an individual, you're acting in a commune, whatever it may be, if you can get down with this in practice, then we think this is a space for you, and we want to ask you to join it.
This is trademark music.
Probably is, but I can clean it up later if I get a complaint.
Since 2004, I've been involved in some of the major climate actions around the world, and we've been, to a degree, conference hopping, trying to influence what was going on in Copenhagen, Paris. And that plays its role, it has its significance, but we keep meeting on their terms, within the parameters and framework that they're largely setting. At what point are we going to set the terms of the conversation and debate, and then at what point are we going to move to real concrete action?
I was one of the participants in Venezuela in the founding of the International of Eco-Socialism. Going into the rural area of Yaracuy, in this sort of Afro-descendant, maroon town that have tried to figure out how they're going to create food security for themselves, and going back to their historical roots of the type of food that they have. And during a massive political war that's happening in Venezuela, it could house 100 people from around the world. That was very transformative.
That's a sick-looking community center
that is especially strong in Afro-Venezuelan communities that hosted the first Eco-Socialist International. You have an ability to not solve all of the problems, but to say, hey, if the problems on the ground in our communities are not about what we have and don't have, but about money, then let's eliminate that problem altogether. Let's trade what we have. And talk to one another, trade with one another, that no one is lacking without
feel
a
like I've
dollar
met
bill
this guy,
exchanging
but
hands.
I don't know.
That we are fed, that we are housed, that we have the educational, the medical, the interpersonal needs all met.
Where people have experience of sustainable living and have had
He is a
the
wizard.
of doing that hasn't been interfered with or hasn't been successfully stopped, they are apt to be at a higher rate of civilization about adapting to a future in which we're going to need levels of sustainability that our Western civilization or lack of civilization has run into problems with.
The Venezuelan state supported us, but it was all directed, led, and controlled by grassroots communities. We don't want to divide ourselves, we need to unite ourselves and bring together people that don't usually talk. So the idea was that the body of Mother Earth herself would be our form of organization. So we divided ourselves among the 5 elements, and each group had the task of coming up with a plan of action over the short, medium, and long term.
Entonces nos planteamos hablar sobre el aire como la voz de la Madre Tierra, hablar sobre el fuego como las energías de la Madre Tierra, la tierra, todo lo que tiene que ver con la salud, la alimentación, el agua como la leche de la Madre Tierra y finalmente el éter o el espíritu. Echa para atrás 500 años para ver 500 años adelante. Eso se corresponde con momentos de la humanidad donde el colonialismo comenzó a invadir diferentes territorios, sobre todo a Asia, África y América.
Can you pause
El
it?
colonialismo europeo se planteó.
So, like, that line there is really where long-term thinking big picture, big history, can maybe bring one out of a nihilistic malaise.
Yeah, definitely.
These problems are not like they took 400 years to get to this point. And even if we're egotistical to think that like we're the fulcrum of change, it will take 400 years to change to something else.
Yeah.
Even if we're thinking in terms of a trough of digging out. But it's interesting to think like if it's not just up or down, but like, sideways. But that thinking in terms of that time scale, and that's it's like you are bigger than it's bigger than you, and sorry,
it's bigger than now.
There's a video game where like there's this antagonist where every character in the game, like their superiors, the heroes, they all say like, "This is bigger than you," and like her last kind of diatribe, rant, as she's going crazy, is like, "Correct. There is nothing that is smaller than me." And she's like punching a wall, basically, getting ready for the final fight with you. It's like funny. It's like if everything's bigger than you, then there's nothing smaller than me because I'm nothing. I've always been treated like nothing. I don't matter. That's the way people take it. I think when you're told it's bigger than you. It's like you're calling me small. Like I don't matter, and if it's gonna take 400 years, it's like it feels like you don't matter, but no, it actually means everyone matters because is big. That big things are made of small things, which is just one of those simple ideas that even if a 6-year-old can grasp.
Right.
There was this joke in it was Adventure Time where like I don't know what character it was, but like they ate like the super fruit of consciousness or something, and it basically like it zoomed out, and then galaxies then become atoms, and then like the atoms become their skin, and then it's like and then it zooms out of their eye, and it's like whoa. Everything's made of small stuff, and small stuff is made of big stuff. It was a fun little like trippy, as
that's cool.
Time is.
I think that's a very powerful way to reframe things, though. So like, we're not all atomized the way that capitalism likes us to be, so that we all individually consume every single thing. which at the same time is very disempowering. But at the same time, we realize that, when none of us are going to be superheroes. There's no.
Yeah. Neither is history. History is
right. Exactly.
Separate, and you separate yourself from history and time, and then you become Kanye. He's completely separated from any historicism.
He's gone completely ahistoric. That's for sure.
Which is odd because he'll call back to his parents and their roots and roles that they had, and as if he's a freedom fighter because he gives them charities.
Well, he's also obsessed with the idea that all black people are the lost tribe of Israel too. Like, how would you know that if you didn't believe in history? Or why would you believe that if you didn't believe in?
It's a contradiction that like wisdom, you find wisdom in the past, but he's referring to the Bible. The Bible is the source of knowledge.
That's the only good source of history.
The Bible is not social sciences. It's the Bible is true because it's the word, so it's actually objective.
Gotcha.
It's like
past that whole.
It's like engineering.
Sure. It's just the user manual of life, man.
Yeah. Him and Musk are objectivist Randians because like they're big STEM lords, and STEM lords are like everything's an engineering problem. Even social problems are engineering problems, which is funny because then they'll say like, well, that's high wages is social engineering, or like these socialists are social engineering, or but of course everything's an engineering problem. But their way of saying it is like there's no such thing as a social problem, only engineering problems, and that's how you get technocrats think like that.
Well, I mean, they take
with the right app, all problems can be solved.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's just because they take on their own worldview as the default position. It's like, of course, I believe in objectivism, therefore I'm objective, therefore everything that flows from me is objectivist as well.
Watch a Twitch debate between a Randian and a non-Randian. The President Sunday just hosted one, and it was quite succinct. In an hour's time, you have someone who's a real Ayn Rand supporter, and he was tasked with. He was on the pro side of a question of like selfishness is a virtue, and you had a philosopher, also a philosophy student or philosopher, who just tore it apart with philosophical arguments of like what does it mean to be virtuous? Like what does it mean to just be objective when there's all these other ways of knowing things? There's a lot more to it, and they go through pretty much all of it. And eventually the objectivist is just shown to just be using circular reasoning and continuously uses it's just self-evident. It's common sense. And when he's challenged on this, he's just like, it's not a problem whatsoever. It's just not a problem, and he ignores that it's a problem. And so the interlocutor, as President Sunday puts it, is just left to also go around in circles, but just try to move on to some other forms of objection.
Yeah. Because when it comes down to it, all their arguments boil down to, I care about this, I don't care about that.
Yeah. And you get that just reading any amount of Ayn Rand or the virtue of selfishness, that like it sounds perfectly reasonable as long as you are 13 and you don't ask the why of like, well, why is that? Why do you think that's good? And and in fact, he's even like, oh, the good is what makes you happy. But he's like, well, not necessarily. It's not just about measuring happiness or something, because the opponent would just bring up how people derive pleasure from being in pain, or things like that, or there's short
or from heroin,
or there's short term. Well, but it's like, oh, that's not real pleasure. That's the fake pleasure. And also,
hey, what's real pleasure then?
And another thing that really got my goat with this Randian was that he kept using the Randian terms that no one else uses. So that's also something the opponent would mention, that like, well, you're using these words like virtue and selfishness. In fact, he even says, the Randian says, like, when I say selfish, I'm actually not talking about an act that only benefits yourself, because that's the parasite's definition or something. Like he uses the word parasite and leech, which Rand does in her books, and he uses those like as if those are objective terms to use when referring to a subject. But again, when you're objectivist, you don't believe in subjects.
Right.
which is a word used by
makes
Marxists
hard.
all the time. What is the revolutionary subject? What's the we use the word subject to refer to when we're referring to something that is fluid or could be more than one thing, and use objective when you're referring to something that's only one thing, which is barely anything in the world. Maybe abstract thought. Or an observable one thing. You can observe one thing at a time, but then when you get down to the quark level, that's bullshit. You can't just observe an atom.
Because observing changes it, yes.
So that's where objectivism cannot be the only reality.
No, of course not.
Of
course not. I mean,
because of the way quarks work.
Geez, the fact that we communicate our ideas with language, and every language has inherent biases baked into it, means that none of us can truly be objective. So, like, I mean, there's no way to talk about.
Seems self-evident to me, Zach.
Yeah,
seems self-evident to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's like an example. There's no word that encapsulates humanity and nature being all just one thing together, like interconnected. Like you talk about humanity or you talk about nature, like that.
You have to
language,
be.
They're separate.
It's complete egoism or psychosis to, when the New Agers like, well, all the religions can be true. There can be an omni faith where it's all one. The great electron as
sure.
Fuck him. But like you just tell a kid like, oh, Inuits have 10 words for snow, and this culture in the desert doesn't have any words for snow. There you go. Now you understand the subjective nature of language. I learned that when I was 8, and it just goes from there. And that is apparently critical race theory to tell kids that there's subjective reality. Because that's really what they're complaining about, that there's this subjective reality. Because if you believe there's subjective reality, then the Bible cannot be inherently true.
That's true.
That's what I hear when that conversation's happening.
That probably is where that's coming up from.
It's sort of something to keep in mind when that gets, that those conversations start when it comes to the old folks or whatever. I think you just gotta say, are you just afraid that the Bible isn't true, or like, hit them? But it's not something to hit people with because they haven't thought about it. So I don't know. It's just something that comes to mind. Okay. Sidetrack. But we're talking about the big, worldview stuff here. So
absolutely, it's important.
Ir a posesionarse de las tierras y de los recursos de los otros.
All the language of the plan, you'll read, it's we will do this, we commit to doing this, we weren't here to make demands. The powers that be are doing their job. The question is, what are we going to do?
Now that there's this plan of action, what greater place to come to spread the news in the United States than Jackson, that is trying to become the most radical, transformative city, with an organization like Cooperative of Jackson's, who has been laying a lot of the ground to talk about solidarity economy, about just transitions, about ecological sustainability.
The solidarity economy from Co-op Jackson is specifically mentioned in the eco-socialist program, and so that's what drew us here. We are an agent of bridge building at the societal level on what practices
like I sound white, or is it just me?
Human society.
No, he definitely does.
Consensus accords on that are life-serving and that we preserve as such, and which we abandon as obsolete to driving wellness in the world.
Welcome to historic Jackson. Mississippi had 555 free people during slavery. Most of them lived in this area. This was so well developed and so controlled by black folk that some of the wealthiest people in the country, the most famous entertainers, writers, Du Bois, and all of them came along this street. Poor black people came from around the state.
Du Bois. Did you mean Du Bois?
To fashion a better.
See, I always hear it as Du Bois as well.
Yeah.
And like,
oh, it is Du Bois. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I first heard it without the closed caption, I thought she was saying Doughboys. like World War I vets.
No, I don't think so. No, it's
Clark. If she's the same woman, she's been a Green Party Senate candidate in New York as well.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, running against Schumer.
Oh, nice. Man, he needs to get out of there.
Well, he's only deaf. Well, what forced Reed out of office? There's progressive shenanigans.
Better life for themselves in the Great Migration. They will migrate into Jackson and regional cities across the South as they migrate north. And let me say that the Jackson movement and the Birmingham movement were parallel movements running at the same time. Same themes, same issues.
All the problems that we face in this world, it's all based on some form of separation. Even the destruction of the planet, which is entirely something that's caused by human beings, came from our anthropocentric mindset. Anthropocentrism, seeing us as something different or at the center of or separate from the earth and everything else, is and only our needs need to be met at the expense of everything else.
They don't view the earth as an entity or as like a living spirit, so like that, or like like the trees and all these things. So like they're just.
I've been to that store.
Resources, even within a lot of.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the guy behind the counter, but Burning Books. That's one of the stores I went to in Buffalo. They're not just a little bookshop. They're expanding to have a event space.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so they're doing really well.
That's amazing.
I don't know what they're building here at this conference, though. It looks like is it making a high tunnel or something indoors?
Yeah, right.
They're building some kind of wood frame.
A socialist circle. So I feel people are trying to recreate a consciousness that's been just tried to be destroyed and taken off the earth.
At some point in the recent past, I realized that the paradigm of socialist revolution that we had always been struggling for, the idea that we would take control of the industrial economy and use it for collective good instead of for private profit, that there was a problem even with that, given the level of industrials. In the 1950s, you could say that we could do something like that and still have an ecological relationship with the earth. Today, it's impossible.
The rape of Africa, the rape of Asia, the rape of these minerally rich, fertile areas, right, is directly connected to the industrialization that have led to the destruction of our planet. You know what I'm saying? And then you can't separate how the people that live in these rich areas are treated in order to get them out of the way to get to these things.
How do you look at the world from the integrated systems of how the world itself works and why it works this particular way here, and how does that relate to, the deserts in North America and Africa, et cetera, and bringing all that knowledge together. I think this particular process and the people who to this point have been assembled in it are struggling through those types of questions in a way we haven't necessarily done collectively anyway in a long time.
You've got to go through the process where you actually sit down and not vote things out, but talk it through until everybody is satisfied, they understand and accept it.
Coming into this room, I knew one other family, and now I know a whole collective of other people, and we will network and we'll be able to work together and then go over to other countries and network. And I think it's all about helping each other.
To me, the most important thing is to create very strong grassroots ecological communities in which people live their lives in a different way.
Oh, wait a minute.
And on the basis of that, we
Hold on, we've had a raid here.
Oh, you just
Thank
noticed?
you so much. I just noticed. I was on the video tab. Thank you so much for the raid, Justin Freakin. My name is Zach. I do Bread Theory here with my guest Dan Plaat of What's Left in Albany. And tonight we're just doing some reaction videos. I mostly do coverage of things like tomorrow night. We're going to be doing People's History of the United States. We go through chapter by chapter in audiobooks, leftist theory audiobooks, and talk about it, discuss it, stuff like that. So welcome in, everybody. So cool.
And we're watching just a short video with speakers or attendants of the first Eco-Socialist International in 2018, which not too long ago. I don't know if there's been a second meeting, but basically, you know, you can see that it's not a huge conference, but it's a conference nonetheless. And any one of these people should basically be on Joe Rogan, but they're as I ranted about in our last video about climate change, jokes about climate change, that they are low status in some way, so they're not a viable podcast guest. You know, in some fashion, and that is a damn shame, and it's a reason to decry the entire mode of the medium. I feel the mode of production of a lot of internet media, that, you know, these real activists, real organizers, only certain podcasts will like concentrate on, like, yes, I will only interview real activists. And I think Revolutionary Radio,
they're real good about that. Yeah,
some podcasts will do that, but they're, of course, they're small, real leftist ones, not the big platforms I'm referring to.
Right,
big Twitch streamers.
Yeah, I really wish Hassan would interview more people on the ground, because he gets good ratings when he does, but you know,
it's odd. It's odd that he doesn't do more of that. You should have staff that could arrange those things, so it's not like he's streaming.
Oh yeah,
he's not gonna be the one to set it up, but
right.
It's odd that he doesn't, but or at least LA versions of it, but you know, he's got his social circles and whatever. He's living his life. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Yeah, I love that Twitch has raids. It's one of the best features of the platform. It really makes it feel more community oriented than any of the other ones.
It's more than just I have to you know, put at the end of my stream, here, check out other people,
like and follow. I'd heard that YouTube Live was going to go in that direction too, but I've not heard anything since I first heard it. So as far as I know, they've abandoned that, but I don't know.
Join together in mass movements around the world and reverse the course of, really, the destruction of the course of evolution and liberation of life on Earth.
For us, it's like, how do we heal the soil? How do we start to move our community towards food security, food sovereignty? And then, more important than that, how do those practices transform society?
It's important to see where your food comes from. It's important to be involved and to also not worry about yourself, but worry about the animals and
want some of that kale.
Yeah, that was some healthy looking kale.
Socialism that has like the environment and our relationship to it at the heart of what it's trying to do is like, it's just so crucial during this time. There are certain things that, like, once they happen, we can't necessarily reverse them, like environmentally speaking. So if we don't address this now, we don't know if we're going to have a future.
I believe in a social ecological revolution that would destroy all systems of domination, and that if we don't do that, we're in real serious trouble.
Here we are now, this laid out. Talk about I can't do this or not. Yes, we can. There's nothing except capitalism with its borders and its boundaries that has been set up to keep us from surviving, to keep us dependent on either ignorant ideologies or ignorant economic systems and human beings.
We have to develop goals that, you know, like match some common unity goals. I think that's a big important thing that we can work on together. Some goals and some unity that, like, makes sense in all the different places that we come from.
The process of grassroots building of independent alternative realities that both enable and empower people, but also create a harmony with the earth. This is the realities of eco-socialism.
Seeing like the lived experiences of people who may not even necessarily be using the word eco-socialism, but who, like, those principles are part of their, like, daily life. A lot of Black, Indigenous, and Campesino communities in Latin America.
It's a time when we must join with Mother Earth and begin in the mothering process, the recreating process, all over again, so that we can reclaim not just water resources and land resources, but reclaim our basic humanity.
Very cool.
I gotta wonder if Chloe Clark should be Next Green Party presidential candidate.
She's yeah. She knows her shit. She's well spoken. She's engaging. So yeah.
Yeah. I think even more so than Howie, because she has a little bit more of that, black grandma energy. But yeah, certainly blows the charisma of Camilla out of the water. Yeah. So that's that. There's obviously a lot of similar YouTube clips, but that was when I typed in just eco-socialism in a YouTube search. I got some lectures. I got some book talks. That was one of the shorter videos that came up. There wasn't too much activism type videos, oddly, because it's sort of more of an academic topic, though obviously there are movements and projects on the ground that do label themselves as eco-socialist. Especially if they're Marxist informed, because you could see there that smattering of like old New York City Marxists, old civil rights, veterans or Black Panther veterans, which is Co-op Jackson's kind of made up of, and that's the true legacy of a Black Panther person, is not some new version of it, not what Black celebrities who say, oh yeah, my parents, they grew up as Panthers, and what are they doing now? It's like, no, that eco-socialist projects like Co-op Jackson are the real legacy, because I'm tired of just hearing people tout like, oh, the Black Panthers, they had the free lunch program, they were providing food for the people. Okay, well, how are you doing that now?
Let's do it. Let's get it together.
You think your one community garden is filling up that gap, of a free lunch program? No, it's not. And the guys, the one guy, the wizard guy's point of like, look, if we're just arguing about like we don't have enough money, then you're definitely working on the capitalist terms. We're really talking about we don't have housing, we don't have things that could be provided through mutual aid, and as Venezuela's Chavez plan put it, as like an eco-socialist model production. That's what Co-op Jackson focuses on. What can they really make on the local level and produce? What kind of services they can provide that aren't farmed out, outsourced, or have to be imported in some way.
Yeah, locally reliant.
Yeah. So for the last half hour, we can talk of an industrial process that very much focuses on the grand global economy scale. And funny. Is that last video? Did I give it to you?
You did indeed. So.
The semiconductor one, which is more along the lines of labor and tech sector. So
cool. Here we go.
Recently, an article about semiconductor degree programs in the United States got posted on Hacker News. It quickly received the flood of comments about the career path. I was really struck by just how negative they were. Here's one. If you're a fab person, you'll work long hours, be on call often, and you'll get woken up often, and eventually will own a tool that you'll be responsible for even when not on call. Lots of abusive and pathological behavior as well. Here's another one.
So working at
the
corporation.
Long-term career prospects of a TSMC engineer. Spoiler alert, they say it sucks. A PhD is mandatory. Postdoctorate experience is also mandatory. And you also have to put 10 plus years in an R&D sweatshop. To sum it all up, another comment asserts that semiconductors are a problematic career with long hours, subpar labor practices, and low pay. People with other skills get out. It makes it sound like it's a prison camp here. Today, American politicians and social elites can't shut up about building fabs for semiconductor independency and finding industry talents to staff those new fabs. But how can America reclaim its title as a world leader in semiconductor manufacturing if Americans actively discourage their peers from joining it? In this video, just a few thoughts that I've been thinking on with regards to semiconductor manufacturing careers.
And this can be applied to other sectors
too. But first,
a
sponsor read for the Asianometry newsletter. Check out the newsletter for full scripts of previously released videos and additional commentary. Back to the show. Before we get started, I have to say, not everyone at TSMC or Samsung works on the manufacturing line, and the workers for these jobs can't smoothly switch between them. Broadly speaking, the semiconductor industry has manufacturing and design jobs. Design jobs help create the designs that the foundries fab out into real chips. Manufacturing jobs are the guys who might have to put on a clean suit and go into the fabs. Interestingly enough, TSMC hires a lot of IC design engineers to work with customers on how to best prepare their chips for fabrication. They also hire a lot of software developers too. For instance, they hire AI engineers to develop algorithms that help make their machines perform better. I would say that these non-manufacturing jobs are a lot like software engineering. You sit in a comfortable air-conditioned office or work from home and earn lots of money. These jobs are fine. Let's talk about the other kind. The goal of semiconductor manufacturing is to deliver extremely complicated products at staggering scale. This requires a lot of operations discipline. Companies like Intel, Samsung, and TSMC succeed on the back of military-style execution. So what are these manufacturing jobs like? I can only describe what I see here in Taiwan. On the manufacturing lines, there are two types of workers. First, you have line technicians and operators, led by a foreman. Their responsibilities are to debug manufacturing issues, operate the line, and inspect products. In Taiwan, these guys work 2 days on, 2 days off, 12-hour shifts from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and vice versa. This is legal in Taiwan, as it also is in the United States, though some state laws will require overtime pay. You only need a high school or vocational school degree for these jobs. However, the internal job progression for this track is somewhat limited. People can ascend to foreman status, but that's about it. Some TSMC people here spend years as a foreman, living life. The pay is significantly better than what someone can get working at 7-Eleven, though I wouldn't say a 7-Eleven job here in Taiwan would have anywhere near the anxiety and high pressure of being a foreman of a TSMC manufacturing line. Except maybe at rush hour, when everyone needs their coffee. And then there are the engineers. They co-work with the technicians to guide the manufacturing process flow and fix problems. TSMC employs several major categories of engineers. Process engineers inspect and analyze the various processes in semiconductor manufacturing. They need to optimize the processes variables and test for optimizations. When yield rates are low, this guy's life is hard. Equipment engineers monitor and inspect the equipment and are on the hook when it breaks. They do require a technical degree, but it does not always have to be in electrical engineering. In Taiwan, equipment engineers will go to the temple, Taiwan is full of them, and buy charms in hopes of making the device act more obedient. R&D engineers work in new product development. They are in a race against time and the competition to create new processes and products. These jobs face particularly high pressures. They regularly require PhDs and work 10+ hours a day on experiments. However, those who succeed will win plaudits and street cred from their peers. It's a genuine way to help make a big impact on the whole company. Production management engineers work on the production forecasting and logistics side. They make sure that products are being properly dispatched, there are enough resources to keep production smooth, and that the customers are aware of progress. Because they have to interact with Western customers, their English skills have to be better than that of the average Taiwanese. And finally, there are the smart manufacturing engineers and AI engineers. I mentioned the latter earlier. They use big data and AI techniques to help improve production. Semiconductor foundries in general have had a hard time filling these positions, but the situation is especially...
Yes.
Any comments so far? Or thoughts?
No, not a lot yet.
Okay.
Just doesn't seem like great work.
Sounds like an industry ripe for unionization.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a post-industrial industry almost. That this is an industry that didn't exist when there was industrial unionism. So it's like it has to be refound. And that he doesn't mention unionization at all. It's just that he's very much looking at it from a capitalist realist point of view of there's a marketplace and jobs and people are being encouraged or dissuaded based on economic, factors and social factors and stuff.
Well, and that it's something that has to be done at scale. Like we can't just scale back our need for these, like maybe not have quite as many smart refrigerators or something like that.
And it's a necessary industry, but necessary why?
Right. And for certain, it is necessary for a lot of things, just maybe not everything.
Pretty tricky in the United States because of the adjacent riches offered by the software development industry. Few jobs, engineering, non-engineering, or otherwise, can compete with American software development. I would argue it's the single best job category in the world. It is relatively easy to break into. There are lots of companies in the US needing software developers. The perks and benefits are legendary. The salaries can get obscenely, ridiculously high, especially when you add stock compensation and so on. There is a reason why 9 out of 10 Berkeley EECS majors graduating in 2018 ended up going into software engineering. EECS literally has electrical engineering in it, yet for them, EE is just an intriguing extra thing they have to do before joining Google or Meta. Or, if they do stay in the semiconductor field, which is rare, many of them end up going into chip design, which has a lot in common with software development. It makes sense. Working on the semiconductor manufacturing line may require them to put on a clean suit and head into the factory. Most very smart, highly educated human beings, social elites, would rather work remote from their bedrooms writing code. This problem is intercontinental. A few months ago, I read a fascinating article about China's own struggles to hire and keep experienced line technicians for their growing microelectronics industry. Their youngest and brightest workers in Shanghai tried out the industry and decided that they'd rather go be software developers for some of China's massive tech giants. It beats having to wear a clean suit every time. It's a problem even in Taiwan, where people are obsessed with TSMC. What track and field is to Jamaica is what electrical engineering is to Taiwan. The entire force of Taiwanese society pushes their young people into it. Every Taiwanese parent thinks of TSMC as an American parent might think of Google or Apple. And yet, despite this, the Taiwanese company has to deal with substantial turnover in its technician and engineer ranks. It is a very demanding work culture. Americans have been experiencing this as TSMC expands into Arizona. A few months ago, a Glassdoor review left by an American training at TSMC went viral. I read it, and it feels to be a pretty fair and even-handed review of the culture clashes. Even here, people brought up in this culture leave all the time. The growing presence of various chip design companies in Taiwan are making it easier for those talents to jump ship. MediaTek and power electronics maker Delta Electronics offer salaries almost as high as TSMC. Not to mention non-Taiwanese companies like those in mainland China and the US. Google's main hardware R&D hub outside the US is in Taiwan, and their presence in Banqiao has been growing quite rapidly. I heard Google has basically poached half of MediaTek's people. The importance of the issue has been reflected in TSMC's unusually high 20% employee wage raise announced in 2020, taking effect in 2022. The company has also been working towards making it easier for employees to purchase TSMC stock. More pay doesn't solve the work environment issue, but it certainly helps.
I mean, it almost seems like the free market is not able to solve this problem. Like, so you would think that higher wages, more stock options, stuff like that. Supposedly that's the answer when there's a higher demand for jobs, but it's just not taking place.
Well, also, it's only seeing us as meat sacks that only care about money and not wanting to put on a clean suit. So if there are jobs that must be filled, I mean, that's a task of, I'm sorry, it's not a market issue, but if you're going to have economic planning, then there has to be equity in pay, or actually even better, remuneration based on effort and sacrifice. The sacrifice you make by going into the fab plant and putting on the clean suit every day, or working a longer shift, because I guess that's what is helpful for the scale of it. You actually get paid more than the coder. It's our marketplace that pays software engineers more, because you fucking tell me. Wired magazine, I'm sure, has many bullshit reasons, or the tech giants will, they make more value for stockholders. The stocks go up faster. They get more investors, and that's what causes it to be valued more, even if they're not actually producing anything of value to society, where semiconductors are a commodity that has a use. It should be valued more, and obviously if it isn't, or it's not valued enough compared to, it's still STEM. This is the STEM work.
Yeah, we're
the
all the STEM
industry.
lords.
So
Come on.
even the industries where it's like the STEM economy is meant to be going towards and training all the kids, it's still the same rat race with the same inequality or inequity between different types of workers within the same sector. So they're all technically engineers, but there's still a natural
electronics,
enforced hierarchy.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that even reorganizing these places as worker-owned and directed cooperatives would do a lot. I mean, if workplace culture and crappy hours and stuff like that is the problem, who better knows how to solve that than the workers?
I mean, all of these complaints, though, it's like he's saying they're relying on financial incentives because they obviously cannot change any
cannot
of the
change the work environment
that a union contract would. But
Right.
that's why a union negotiation is so contentious, is because it is challenging those areas that are not just having to do with money, but of course are about actually taking away from the profit line,
Absolutely.
which giving a little bit of more extra pay, not as much of a hit. But the culture can also not just be about like what costs more, but like no, what keeps our workers under our control, or what makes,
that's a big part of it, I'm sure.
There is petty shit like that in play.
All right, well, let's try and finish this up because we're coming up to
you're a bad time.
To 9 o'clock after me. I do got a bad time.
Back in the United States, I think Intel has found success in building their own pipelines of semiconductor specialist technicians.
Yeah.
For instance, Intel
School
has set up a
to
long-standing
job pipeline,
partnership
basically.
with various Arizona community colleges to enroll prospective technicians in a 2-year technical education degree program. In Malaysia, Intel offered research grants for students to learn semiconductor engineering, particularly in packaging, where the company has a facility. The company also contributed the time of their own senior engineers to help train these people in industry practices. The benefit of starting on ground zero is a trained, affordable workforce that meets the company's specific needs.
Just look at the desolation. Like, what a soul-sucking place. Imagine being one of those people in the very back row and like,
that's where you park. Yeah.
That's where you got to park. Man,
you almost need a little trolley to just.
I was thinking, you need those shuttles like they have at Disneyland and stuff. But
you know what's even more disheartening? When there'll be a solar punk page or some future tech page, they'll have a picture of that like this as like, this is cool.
But then sleeker skyscrapers as the place where you actually work. Yeah.
Or you'll have the sleek high rises and whatever, but it's like actually the reality is this with the big vast parking lot. Your little utopian visions don't include all the parking that would be needed because you're just assuming it'll be trains. But guess what? The same model of labor and production that gives you high rises also gives you highways.
Yeah. True. Yeah. There's no solar punk without eco-socialism, or at least no viable form anyway.
Or eco-anarchism.
But just imagine, like, even having to get lunch at a place like this. You're certainly not going to sprint across 5 acres of parking lot.
There's a cafeteria. It's assumed the blue building is the cafeteria. The fab plan is the gray box behind it.
Yeah, so like you better hope that cafeteria serves some really good shit, or man, that's just gonna grind you down over the years.
Well, it can, but it'll just be the same 10. It'll be like 10 items, and
exactly.
That's the way my cafeteria works. It's not a cafeteria. It's just a cafe with a grill, and they have what they have, and they have what they can get, and there's basically 10, 15 things that you can make. Sandwich wise and things you can flash fry, but
sure,
it gets a little old if you're going to her every day. Which I limit myself to just getting something twice a week.
Sure.
Basically, I make my own lunch, I make my own sandwich, but maybe I'll go and get an order of tater tots because it's good to have those actual deep fried tater tots.
Yeah, that's a nice little treat once in a
Pack your lunch, recycle your pee. Good callback. Good callback, James.
That was good, James. That was very good.
The fuck is that place? Yeah, it's a five
God.
plant. It's the future.
Yeah.
It's it's Arizona. It's gonna be built in Arizona.
Oh God, this is all Arizona's gonna be in like the next decade. But yeah, I'm getting flashbacks of like student food services back when I was in the dorms when I was first in college, and like the first day you get in, like I had a meal plan. Like the first couple of years I was there, and the first day you get in, like there's a waffle maker here, and oh look, I can get like 5 kinds of drinks and like stuff like that, and it just seems like the possibilities are endless. But then after a week, you've exhausted all the possibilities.
A month, perhaps. A month with all the combos.
Yeah, right. Like, do I really got to go back to this place? And like, oh,
that's how it worked with me, where it wasn't actually meant to be a meal plan. It was like it's a commuter college, City College of New York.
Oh, okay.
So there is a cafeteria, but it's like it is meant to be just like a big
fast,
fast
stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's a grill and there's different stations and things, but it's not meant to be like a 3 square meal place.
Sure.
And what they did was they basically gave me alternative currency where I spend $500, I get $450 worth of credit there. But it wasn't even by credit; they were little like voucher coupons that were just I was using them as dollars. And after I was getting cereal, but I was kind of having lunch and dinner there. But I think after first 2 weeks, I'm like, I can't go on like this. I can't, I'm burning through the money, it's just too much money. And I obviously I need to eat better than this. So I finally fucking learned to cook for my own, and get real groceries besides just milk and cereal. And I slowly grew out from there, the first year away from home. The real problem was when I first moved to Manhattan, it was like there was a week before the cafeteria was open. So I actually was thinking, I was treating this like a normal, like a SUNY college experience where you live your whole life on the college campus instead of I'm living in a neighborhood. So I spent like the first day or so just like not knowing where to get food because I'd never, been there before, in this neighborhood. So I had to go out and walk around the neighborhood and find where the takeout places were, find where the grocery store was, so I could get food. Because I was starving myself for half a day, and I found I got pizza. Very odd first day or so.
Wow. Yeah. Man, college food. Ugh. So I'm just trying to think about alternatives to this. Like, this is already laid out. Like the parking lot itself, because of its massiveness, is laid out in more or less a city-style grid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean,
yeah,
it would take more resources to more water and more.
This is what city skylines would really look like in your city.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Well, why not put up mid-rises and just treat those as apartment blocks, and then just.
Well, this isn't a town. This is a workplace.
But it could be. It has like a town's worth of people that seem to be working here.
So shouldn't there just be worker housing, right? And you just have a company town.
Well, not well, definitely.
That's not Freedom Zach.
Definitely. No, I'm definitely not saying a company town. I'm just saying why not put residential
Because in this sector, they're not being, there is this competitive wage factor, but everyone their salaries are way above minimum or livable. They can afford a suburban house or something.
Right. So, you can make nice stuff right there. And then you could, that, have all the amenities right there too. So it'd be like its own little mini city. And
they'd still drive everywhere though. They still drive everywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. They'd probably drive.
It would just be like the other 100 acres going to the right of this. That would be a suburb called subdivision. And they'll still drive their car from one end, and then you'll still need the big lot.
Yeah.
I guess it could be more like the villages where that has internal transportation. But I looked at a map of the villages from Google Earth, and they're like big subdivisions, but there's still a big ass highway that's like bisecting it like a big cross. and the villages are like quadrants.
Okay.
Cycled around these big stroads, or and so on. Because there's still Walmarts and all the other shopping center stuff.
For sure. All right. Well, let's finish it up.
Yeah, almost done.
But I also see the flip side of this notion that these Hacker News commenters so artfully point out, which is that these workers end up having such specialized skills that they cannot leave the field even if they tried, and as a result, they can get underpaid for their specialty and even sometimes poorly treated. It is a reflection of the fact that there are really only a few companies who do advanced semiconductor manufacturing. Software engineers and even IC chip designers, on the other hand, have a far greater employer pool.
Global Foundries has been getting the deals in New York.
There are a lot of ultra-impressive skills that the market similarly undervalues, like the trombone. But what can we do about the strategically important but economically undervalued situation of semiconductor skills? Individual income credits for hardware technicians, extra taxes for software engineers. What do you think? Now that leads into another point, immigration. Let's get those foreign semiconductor talents to come here to the United States, right? For that one, I'm not so sure if it's politically feasible. The big question for me is whether or not the problem is perceived to be serious enough to elicit such a radical move in policy making. Policy Bureau from Georgetown says that the now passed CHIPS Act will create about 8 new fabs, translating to about 27,000 new jobs. Which sounds about right to me. Of those, the report mentions that some of these jobs will need to be filled by foreigners. The industry will likely need at least 3,500 highly skilled foreign workers with prior expertise. Ideally, these workers would have experience working at firms like TSMC or Samsung, bringing tacit engineering knowledge to American workers. What kind of jobs are these going to be? I cannot really identify. Are these TSMC technicians, engineers, R&D people, or high-level executives? The high-level executives and R&D people can already come to the United States if they want to. Many were educated in the US, and many hold dual citizenship. I know one of either TSMC's chairman or CEO has American citizenship, as does Morris Chang. Okay, then how about the semiconductor engineers and technicians? For that, I'm not sure if 3,500 jobs is a serious enough shortage to make a special program just for them. I look back at the H-1A visa created in the 1980s to address the nursing shortage back then. For the 6 years it was in effect, they issued nearly 40,000 visas, mostly to Filipinos. The program was then sunset, totally ending by the 1990s. In this rather divided political environment, I doubt it can happen again. 90% of TSMC's hires are Taiwanese. People are going to point to that. And immigration doesn't solve the fundamental issues of Americans choosing to work for software over hardware. To conclude, I want to go back to something about young Americans and semiconductors. In his newsletter, Semi-Analysis hit upon something that has been echoed by a lot of other people I have talked to about the issue. Young Americans don't have easy access to hardware anymore. Young Americans have easy access to software. It's super easy to go to GitHub and download some open source software like Rails to set up a website. And with that, young people can spark an interest that will eventually lead them to their future career. That's not so easy with today's hardware. Semi-Analysis points at right to repair laws for the reason why this is the case, and it certainly doesn't help, but there should also be something said about complexity. In the 1960s, your average person can break open a transistor radio and understand it enough to fix it with their own hands. Personal computers were more complex, but most people can go inside and interact directly with the hardware to make it do their bidding. But your average cell phone is today just too complex, built with stacks of technologies that a single person can spend a whole lifetime studying. The most a lot of people can ever do is change the battery. So today, users don't interact with the actual hardware every day. They interact with the GUI software and slick UX. And as a result, that's what they eventually get interested in and go do as a career. It also means that the average person on the street sees their iPhone or Samsung or Huawei more as a mystical remote talisman than a tool with levers and pulleys that you can manipulate to go do things. The integrated chip inside the phone is a beautiful thing, but young folks never get to see it, never get to tinker with it, and as a result, they grow up never thinking about it, leaving them to do something else. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Interesting little analysis at the end there. Just it's not the sexy job that seems to be his conclusion. It's not the thing that people talk about or think about all that much. It's all behind the scenes. So,
but he isn't totally cultural about it. We don't have a right to repair, so it's not even possible to have access to have an interest in it. So that's a material thing that he notices. Yeah, I was interesting how that was recommended to me somehow. I don't know how, but it was.
It's an interesting video.
YouTube recommendations can be really weird sometimes.
Yeah.
Like it just recommended me it just recommended me a boxing tutorial because the title was left infighting. Left hook moving infighting.
It's using your left more in fighting.
Because infighting meaning going up to your opponent, you know, to pivot.
Oh, it's even more.
And
like,
using the left.
Getting up in their space.
So,
yeah. Okay.
That was the title. So it's like, okay. Man,
that's really funny. That's really funny. I should make an emoji.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, James jokes. My access to technical skills was smacking the TV.
Yeah, I don't know why Jet in Jetsons got modded. I don't have that word set to be taken out. That's very strange.
Well, we're assuming it's Jetsons.
I don't know what else it would be.
Jacksons.
The Simpsons. That's it.
Oh, simp. You have simp blocked.
I do, just because Twitch is so touchy about that word, and it's really annoying. But
I talked to my father about it on a hike once, just explaining it to him.
Yeah. All right.
So leave you off. You can get to bed. So I will do my show. I'm back on. I did upload an episode last week. Or did I? I didn't do one last week because I was kind of concerned and also just procrastinating. I just didn't feel like going to the station after work. But it should be better. I don't know. I'll force myself to. Now that I know I'm making good progress, and now it's just about doing more. So that was the last episode I did. Union busting in the Amazon warehouse. In Albany, well, not in Albany, but near Albany. It was the third Amazon workers union election. Had a similar result as the Bessemer plant, but kind of different union busting was being used. They didn't really cheat on the election itself, but they did bring in tons of union busting consultants. They outnumbered the managers at certain points, and they were doing a lot of one-to-one talking. And so on. So
crazy shit.
Lots to take into account. But unionizing, of course, even when you don't win that union election, that's just for the official recognition. Which I think, when it comes to the building the labor union, movement in the first place, that was all legal. None of that was codified or legal, or it was all the Labor Relations Act in the late 30s. That codified it all, and you could argue that that's actually when it started to go downhill, because now that you're like part of the system and it's working, all unions that were legal basically became business unions. So there was no separation between a militant union or a non-militant. It was defunct that you were going to be a business union if you were going to be recognized as any kind of union whatsoever, an official, and when you strike, it's legal to strike, but only under the rubric that's created by the federal government,
rules,
which the anarchists will point out is complete bullshit. You shouldn't you shouldn't go along with that noise.
No, not at all.
So go. IWW is why we promote it. It's why I'm a member. I'm going to do the voting.
Absolutely.
A friend of mine who was a roommate of mine for a long time, he is going to be on the education committee. So that's positive. There's sort of an argument about if the current editor of the International Worker, their paper, should continue. A lot of people think she's doing a great job, way better than the last one. But there was this little paragraph or two about how she was, there was a story that she kind of fucked with and torpedoed somehow. But it's anonymous, so I'm not sure what to make of it. And it wasn't part of the candidate, the only person who was really not don't vote for this person was this woman who literally only is allowed to run for office because of a federal ruling that threw out the IWW's way of doing things, basically saying we won't recognize how the IWW Constitution works, so she's able to run for office, basically. We don't have the right to bar people from running for office, even though she was recalled from her position and so on.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, that was a lot of fun doing these videos. It always is. So can't wait till we get back together in another couple weeks.
We'll go 2 weeks and see. Give me some suggestions of what you think we should be doing.
Yeah, there's a second thought video from about a year ago about the housing crisis that I thought was pretty good. It got recommended to me. So
cover that.
Yeah, that might be fun to cover.
Obviously, these videos that I'm showing you were all kind of found while at work. You know, at work, I'm listening to stuff on YouTube mostly, and I will be actively looking for certain things or certain topics. That's why I did a search for eco-socialism, because I just got tired of all of my recommended videos just being the same Twitch conversations about or that because we have an election next week, that most are about the complaining about Democrats being shit, but not having an alternative electorally, and at best complaining that we don't have electoral alternative because of the two-party system being authoritarian. So anyway, I'll let you go. I can hear your wife, I think.
Yep. Yeah, we're getting ready to go to bed. So
all right.
Thanks again for being on. Appreciate it. And have a good night, Dan.
Bye-bye.
All right. So check out Dan at 3lefts.news. I put the link in the chat there not that long ago. Instead of asking for recommendations of who to raid into, I'm just going to do it myself this time. So we're going to raid into Bread Crochets. So everyone on Twitch, hang on as we start the raid. Thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. And see y'all tomorrow night for A People's History of the United States.
You are trick-or-treating tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I can't raid in Bread Crochets either. That's right. I'm not going to do a show tomorrow because that was dumb. It's a trick-or-treat night, so we'll see how it goes. Bread Crochet is not allowing me to raid. That's all right. So maybe we just did Jet Extremist, so we will do somebody else tonight. I am going to recommend Riff Tracks. That's always fun. Check out Riff Tracks. You're quite welcome, Ice Picker 82. Riff Tracks, comedy one. It's not an interactive channel. They just play their content. But if you like Mystery Science Theater 3000, it's a lot of the same guys from that. So it's a lot of fun. Hopefully they will allow a raid, but people have been shutting that down recently for some reason.
Where are the other baskets, dear? Really
Hold on. I will be with you in a moment.
I am here dealing with this.
All right.
Congratulations.
I'm going to try and reload because it's just not working for some reason. We'll try Bread Crochets again. Maybe it was just that. No. All right. Not able to raid, so I'm just going to end it. Oh, well. Have a good night, guys. Check out Riff Tracks. Check out Bread Crochets. Both cool channels if you're looking for something else to do tonight. Thanks for being here. See you